Novel Empire. Immortal God of Battle. Chapter 261 Manner. Xiang Nan could only try one by one. The five of them nodded and frowned from time to time, causing Xiang Nan's heart to tremble. In the end, he chose a long shirt, which satisfied everyone the most. This long gown is sewn with expensive, Jingling satin. Its entire body is ink black. At the collar cuffs, there are dark gold bracelet stripes embroidered. Long shirt, waist retracted, wide collar, loose sleeves, wide shoulders. The width of that shoulder was definitely not something an ordinary person could control. Only martial artists were the most suitable. In addition, Xiang Nan's current figure was already very good. After putting on this long gown, he looked even more handsome and upright. Everyone's eyes lit up, and even the maid's eyes flashed with delight. Not bad, not bad. Jiang Yu repeatedly praised, beautiful without losing maturity, but also proper for self-cultivation. Murong Wanqing also looked at Xiang Nan in surprise and said, "I didn't expect that you would look much more energetic after changing into a good set of clothes." Xiang Nan smiled bitterly, "I'm dressed in ordinary clothes, but it can't be said to be tattered." "Alright, we'll take all 20 of them. Pack them up." Murong Wanqing waved her hand. "All of them?" Xiang Nan said, "Isn't one enough?" Murong Wanqing frowned and said, "You can wear one with all your might. What about the future? Cut the crap and it won't cost you any money." "Alright, that's what you're saying." Xiang Nan shook his head helplessly. "Sigh, this won't do." Jiang Yu hurriedly said, "The two of you are going to see the Murong clan master as lovers tonight. Hurry up and train in advance. Don't look so righteous." Sunset, take Xiang Nan's arm. "Hurry up. Don't be embarrassed." Murong Wanqing hesitated for a long time before finally holding onto Xiang Nan with a red face. As for Xiang Nan, he stood there like a piece of wood, extremely stiff, with an unnatural expression on his face. "Where are you holding the tiger?" Jiang Yu slapped Xiang Nan on the shoulder. "Relax, be intimate, yes, tilt your upper body towards sunset." "TSK. Can you be more serious? This is a matter of life and death for sunset. Don't make any mistakes for me." Originally, Xiang Nan was the only one embarrassed when picking clothes, but now Murong Wanqing's face had also been blushing. Xiang Nan felt a little happy in his heart. It was rare to see Murong Wanqing embarrassed, so he could be considered to have taken revenge. Makes her talk so choking. Good is good, but I always feel that something is wrong. Shen Linhai looked at Xiang Nan with his chin on his back. After saying this, everyone nodded their heads repeatedly and discovered something flawed. "Right, put this on." Shen Linhai snapped his fingers and took off a string of simple Buddhist beads from his wrist and put them on Xiang Nan's wrist. He said, "This is what my third uncle asked for when he went to the South Sea Heavenly Spirit Temple. I can't buy it for much money." Only after Xiang Nan put on a string of Buddhist beads did everyone nod in satisfaction. "Come, let's continue to behave." Jiang Yu pushed Xiang Nan's shoulder and said, "You look pretty when you walk. You walk like a dragon and walk like a tiger. You are very manly. It's just that I'm missing some rules and a sense of ceremony. With just a little exercise, it'll be perfect." "You really want to practice walking?" Xiang Nan kept complaining. Xiang Nan was dragged around by this group of people for an entire afternoon before he managed to make them barely satisfied. At dusk, everyone returned to the entrance of the Haoran sect. The Murong clan already had a carriage to pick them up. "Relax, be natural. There's no problem. Jiang Yu escorted Xiang Nan and Murong Wanqing into the carriage and instructed Xiang Nan worriedly. The carriage set off. Inside the car, the two of them had nothing to say. Xiang Nan felt that the atmosphere was frozen. He wanted to find a topic to break the awkward atmosphere. However, she discovered that Murong Wanqing was lowering her head. From Xiang Nan's point of view, she could only see a shallow dimple on her cheek. This dimple was much shallower than usual. There were only two situations where this dimple could occur. One was smiling, and the other was forcefully biting his lower lip. Xiang Nan tilted her head slightly. The moment she saw Murong Wanqing's face, she turned her head away and her shoulders trembled slightly. But Xiang Nan had already seen it clearly. Her eyes were a little red. It was hard to imagine what kind of pressure this girl was under every day in the Murong clan. The pressure was so great that it was so painful for her to meet her biological father. Xiang Nan swallowed the words he was about to say. Instead, he revealed a brilliant smile and naturally hugged Murong Wanqing's shoulder. He told her in a gesture that with me around, the sky would collapse and I would help you carry it. Murong Wanqing's body suddenly stiffened for a moment, and then she relaxed. Even her trembling shoulders relaxed. The carriage traveled steadily and quickly, and soon arrived at a large manor. This manor was located at the southern end of the Haran mountain range, at the foot of a green mountain. It belonged to one of the properties of the Murong clan. "Let's go, Shaoqing. We're here." Xiang Nan changed his title very much. Murong Wanqing whispered, and jumped out of the carriage with Xiang Nan's help. Today, Murong Wanqing was much more obedient than usual. Even Murong Wanqing's big brother, who was waiting at the entrance of the manor, was slightly stunned when he saw this scene. Then, he smiled in relief. The three of them entered the manor side by side. Because the manor was too large, there were a few small carriages in the courtyard. "Shaoqing, take your own car. I'll talk to Xiang Nan." Big brother Murong Wanqing greeted him. Under Murong Wanqing's worried gaze, he took Xiang Nan's shoulder and got into the carriage. "My name is Murong Zheng." The man said, "I watched Shaoqing grow up. No one knows her better than me." It can be seen that Shaoqing is the most relaxed and at ease when she is by your side. "Yes." Xiang Nan nodded. Murong Zheng grabbed Xiang Nan's wrist with his hand and said seriously, "Don't look at little Qing's strong exterior and unforgiving behavior, but her heart is very fragile. I won't allow anyone to bully her. If anyone hurts her, I will be the first to do so. Do you understand what I mean?" "I understand." Xiang Nan nodded solemnly, "Whoever wants to hurt her, step over my corpse first." When Xiang Nan said this, he was indeed serious, but it was not out of love between men and women, but out of brotherly righteousness. Murong Zheng carefully observed Xiang Nan's expression. When he was sure that Xiang Nan had said this from the bottom of his heart, he nodded and said, "I'm relieved that you said this. Perhaps my father and my brothers are more interested in being a match for each other, but I only care about whether Shaoqing is happy or not. As long as the two of you are focused on staying together, how much difficulty is there? Big brother, I will help you up. Don't be afraid." "Thank you, big brother." Xiang Nan replied sincerely. Through a few simple conversations, Murong Zheng left an excellent impression on Xiang Nan. This was what a big brother should look like. Chapter 262 Self-Confidence. Murong Zheng had been sending the two of them to Murong Wanqing's study before he said, "Father has just arrived." He only stayed one night and left. Perhaps he is dealing with the family business here. He will summon you later. Don't worry, just call me if you need anything. After saying that, Murong Zheng held Xiang Nan's and Murong Wanqing's hands together and clenched them tightly before turning around to leave. The two of them waited at the door for nearly 2 hours. When Xiang Nan thought that the study room might be empty, he heard a cough from inside. "Come in." A strong but somewhat exhausted voice rang out. Xiang Nan and Murong Wanqing exchanged glances before pushing open the door. Murong Chongshan was the current patriarch of the entire the Murong clan, and was also the number 2 figure of the Murong clan. The number 1 person in the Murong clan was not the clan head, but Murong Chongshan's father, Murong Wanqing's biological grandfather. I heard that Murong Grandpa was once one of the most famous figures in the military, and he was also one of Haotian Emperor's right-hand men. When Haotian Emperor took down the vast territory of the Haotian Empire, Murong Grandpa made a lot of contributions. Afterwards, he was sent to Haojing by Emperor Haotian, and he was always one of his trusted aides. However, Old Master Murong was well aware of the difficulties and dangers in the political arena. He quickly resigned from his post and returned to the East China Sea to run the family business. Afterwards, he handed over the entire family to his son, Murong Chongshan. That Murong Chongshan had been strictly disciplined by Old Master Murong since he was young, and he also had an identical hot temper. At this time, Murong Chongshan was sitting behind the desk, slowly rubbing his temples. He raised his head slightly and looked at Xiang Nan and the other two. His gaze fell on Xiang Nan, not paying too much attention to his own daughter. However, he did not ask Xiang Nan and the other two to sit down. Murong Chongshan heaved a long sigh of relief and said to Xiang Nan, "I already know your identity very well. I also learned about you from Luo Fei and Sun Chun." Hearing this, Xiang Nan was shocked. The matter of him pretending to be Murong Wanqing's lover was an impromptu one at noon today. It could be said that half a day had not passed yet. And Sun Chun was the garrison general of Fallen Moon City, Luo Fei was the garrison general of Beijiang Frontier Defense City. In such a short period of time, not only did Murong Chongshan know that the two of them had interacted with him, he also found out about him from them. From this, it could be seen how shocking the energy of the Murong clan was. Murong Chongshan crossed his hands on the table and looked at Xiang Nan seriously. "The two of them have a high opinion of you. That's why I'm willing to meet you. Otherwise, with your status, you won't be able to meet someone like me in your lifetime. Do you understand?" "Understood." Xiang Nan did not care how arrogant Murong Chongshan was. In fact, he did have the ability to be arrogant. "Father," Murong Wanqing took a step forward and said anxiously. Murong Chongshan waved his hand and said, "Little Qing, go out. I'll talk to Xiang Nan." But Murong Wanqing bit her lips. "Get out." Murong Chongshan's tone was not angry, but there was an unquestionable majesty. Murong Wanqing looked at Xiang Nan and walked out of the room with red eyes. "Say it." When Murong Wanqing walked out, Murong Chongshan's back foot said, "How much does it cost to leave Shaoqing? If you ask for a price, I can afford it." Xiang Nan was stunned for a moment, and then he laughed. "Is it so cliché? Can you put it another way? Is it the task of your great aristocratic family to persuade others to directly bid?" It seemed that the rich people in the world had all kinds of different hobbies, but when they tried to persuade their daughter's useless lover, they all spoke in an astonishingly consistent tone. "Can I have some more dog blood?" Murong Chongshan did not get angry and said, "This is normal. Wealth is my greatest advantage. Is it unreasonable for me to use my advantage to satisfy your needs? I know that your martial artists don't value money, but the Murong clan is also involved in the business of spirit herbs, medicinal pills, and even martial techniques. I can give you all of these. Let's talk frankly. If you have any ideas, just say it. There's no need to worry about my identity. Tell me, why should I choose you, a person without status or background, and give up a son-in-law who has almost everything? Okay. Xiang Nan nodded and said, with my status as an outsider, I shouldn't have criticized your family's internal affairs, but since you let me speak openly, I will tell you. I think, as a father, you should consider the happiness of your children more than just expanding the family. Murong Chongshan leaned back on his seat and said, for another reason, this statement is not convincing. Xiang Nan frowned and said, isn't the ultimate goal of wealth to make him and his family live better? The Murong clan has already achieved such a huge property. Could it be that they are still in the minuscule realm of having to sell out their children's marriages to gain benefits? Murong Chongshan chuckled, it's not convincing. Let's change the reason. What a ruthless character. This was the real big shot. He doesn't refute you or threaten you at all. He doesn't even answer your questions. This kind of conversation is the most terrifying. Without any reason, he can make you more and more speechless, more and more guilty. In the end, you will only be defeated. If you want to convince this kind of person, you can't do it for 10,000 reasons. You have to use real chips to impress him. Xiang Nan let out a long sigh and smiled. He casually pulled a chair and sat opposite Murong Chongshan. Murong Chongshan looked at Xiang Nan's impolite actions, but did not say anything else. Since you are a businessman, let's talk from the point of view of interests. Xiang Nan smiled and said, choosing me is an investment. To tell the truth, Xiang Nan was also beating drums in his heart, but he did not show it by forcefully holding on. The corner of Murong Chongshan's mouth curled up slightly, go on. Xiang Nan nodded and said, how big is a business family? Number 1 in the world. Even if the Murong clan becomes the number 1 clan under the heavens, I would like to ask, if a half-saint expert is determined to destroy the Murong clan, will you be able to stop him? Yes, continue. Murong Chongshan did not comment. Xiang Nan said, you have invested so much in business, but I think it is time for you to invest some money in the world of martial arts. This is a world where martial power reigns supreme. No matter how much money you have, you won't be able to kill a powerful martial enemy. If you choose me, it will be an investment in martial arts. I will use my own strength to prove what I said. I will definitely be the strongest person in the martial arts world in the future. So confident. Murong Chongshan finally laughed. Xiang Nan said neither humbly nor arrogantly, that's how confident you are. Chapter 263 Probe. I think. Xiang Nan thought for a moment and said, the reason why you are willing to see me tonight is because you have considered my talent in martial arts, right? As he spoke, Xiang Nan raised his right hand and a thunderball slowly rose from his palm. The thunderball crackled, filled with astonishing power. In order to increase his bargaining chip, Xiang Nan turned around again and released the power of the white flame lightning. The lightning ball instantly turned into a ball of white lightning, and the surface of the ball was even surrounded by white flames. I've already heard of your talent. Murong Chongshan nodded in satisfaction. Lightning meridians are indeed rare in the world, especially heavenly-grade lightning meridians S. However, the world of martial arts does not rely on talent. How can I guarantee that after I betroth my daughter to you, you will not be killed by an expert a few years later, causing me to waste a few years of my life in vain? Xiang Nan asked, is there a risk-free investment in this world? Even if I really die in battle, what you've lost is only a few years of your daughter's youth. Sunset is still young. I think this kind of risk is worth taking. General Sun Chun, General Luo Fei and I have already proven my courage to you. And now, it is the 12 joint examinations. I will prove my strength with my actions. Murong Chongshan laughed. I have seen quite a few young people, but in front of me, all of them follow my lead or be cautious. You're not bad. Although you lack some confidence, at least you're not afraid. I'm leaving tomorrow. Take good care of little Qing for the past few years. I hope I'm not mistaken and that what you said is not boasting. Alright, let's go out. Xiang Nan stood up and bowed to Murong Chongshan. I hope what this junior said just now didn't hit you. Goodbye. Xiang Nan pushed open the door and walked out. Outside the door, Murong Wanqing's eyes were red. Obviously, she had been crying quietly. When she saw Xiang Nan come out, she grabbed Xiang Nan's hand and nervously said, "How is it? Did my father make things difficult for you?" Xiang Nan pretended to be worried and sighed, "I'm afraid." Hearing these two words, Murong Wanqing froze as if she had been struck by lightning, her eyes filled with despair. "I'm afraid." Xiang Nanku turned around and laughed, "I'm afraid your father has agreed. You don't have to worry about marrying rich children from other provinces." Ah! Murong Wanqing was stunned for a long time before she finally reacted. She reached out to pinch Xiang Nan's waist fiercely. Xiang Nan grinned in pain, "Easy, easy. Don't forget that you are a third-level origin returning martial cultivator." "Ah, shit, pinch the meat off for me." Murong Wanqing broke into tears and laughed. She punched Xiang Nan's chest with a pink fist. "I almost scared you to death." Xiang Nan wiped away the tears on her face in pain and said, "Don't worry, I'll protect you this time." Murong Wanqing stared blankly at Xiang Nan. Suddenly, her face turned red and she hurriedly lowered her head. Xiang Nan was about to speak when suddenly, a commotion came from his storage ring. "Hawkeye. What's the matter?" Murong Wanqing asked hurriedly when she saw that Xiang Nan's expression was wrong. "You can go back to the sect by yourself. I'm in a hurry and have to leave." Xiang Nan explained and ran away in a hurry. "Oh." Murong Wanqing frowned, her nose slightly unhappy. In the sky, Xiang Nan spread out his Yuan Qi feathered wings and was flying towards the southeast. In the night, he took out his eagle eye. A sizzling sound came from the eagle eye, and then he heard someone whispering to him. The operation this time was not very successful. The nature sect is heavily guarded, so it is difficult to make a move. The only chance is Xiang Nan, who lives alone in Sun Palace. But he failed last night. I didn't expect him to be so alert. Another unfamiliar voice sounded. Well, the other assassinations failed as well. A woman appeared from nowhere and even injured several of our experts. That's right, it's them. Xiang Nan's heart skipped a beat. It was those mysterious people who were speaking. The woman they were talking about should be the dream butterfly. Judging from the Hawkeye signal, the place to speak should be on the outskirts of the southeast region of Haotian City. That was the second place marked with a red line. Very quickly, Xiang Nan arrived close, but he didn't dare to rashly approach. Instead, he landed on a mountain 5 miles away. He lay on the mountain and looked over from here. He could just see the forest clearing. There was a slight flash of fire there, but it was too far away to see the actual situation clearly. Xiang Nan used his lightning vision and wiped his eyes with both hands. A flash of lightning flashed through his eyes. This lightning vision instantly cleared up the blurry line of sight from a distance. Beside a campfire, there was a whole circle of people. Those people were wearing loose white robes, and their entire bodies were enveloped. They could not even see any skin at all, and their faces were covered with white veils. Xiang Nan used his lightning photoelectric eyes to peek from a distance and used his eagle eyes to monitor the enemy's movements clearly. However, the white robes of those white-robed people were very strange. When they looked at them with their lightning-like eyes, they were only a blurry glow. It should be that the white robes themselves had the function of concealing their yuan qi. They were also able to conceal the fluctuations of their yuan qi, so there was no way to explore their realm geometry. At this moment, 5 more people fell from the sky. These 5 people were dressed in black robes, and all 5 of them were standing at the edge of the campfire. As for those white-robed people, they stood farther away, obviously with 5 black-robed people at the core. How is it? That Xiang Nan is harder to deal with than I thought. I took advantage of his deep sleep to ambush him, but he actually reacted. Xiang Nan held his breath and listened quietly, but only the voice from the eagles I could not tell who was speaking. Immediately after, another voice came. Looks like the plan to assassinate the league players can only go so far. Next, it will depend on the performance of the 5 of you. This time, no matter what, we must defeat all the experts of the 12 sects in the joint examination. We want to unify all the first-rate sections. We can't delay any longer. The Haoran sect is a tough nut to crack. They refuse to surrender to us even if they die. Let's give them a show of might this time. That's right, sweeping the strongest disciples of the 12 sects of the Blue Tide continent clean in front of all the martial artists in the world will make the Haoran sect lose face. The 5 of them are league players. Xiang Nan was shocked. The 5 of them wanted to defeat all the experts of the Blue Tide continent in the tournament. This meant that they were participating in the 12-sect joint examinations and were also people from other continents. Obviously, those white-robed people should be some high-level martial artists. Their mission was to assassinate the potential contestants of the 12 sects joint examination, and also to protect the 5 black-robed people. The realms of the 5 black-robed people were not as high as those of the white-robed people, but their status was higher than that of the white-robed people. Because the black-robed people were only qualified to participate in the 12-sect joint examination. But who were they? How did he sneak in? Why do you have such an arrogant tone? One of them sneered, the rise of the Profound Sky sect and Soaring Cloud sect is already a fact. Nothing can stop us. This first step is to use the Nature's Nature sect. Let all the martial artists in the world see just how far apart his Nature's Nature sect is from us. At that time, the reputation of the Haoran sect in the world of martial arts will plummet. Countless martial arts geniuses will flow out of the Blue Tide continent and join our heavenly profound sect. A first-rate sect. That's definitely not our heavenly profound sect's goal. We need to be the strongest sect. Heaven. Mysterious. Sect. Hearing these 3 words, Xiang Nan's eyes almost spat out flames. These 3 words left an unforgettable pain in Xiang Nan's heart. Someone is here. Suddenly, a voice came from the eagle's eyes. After Xiang Nan heard the 3 words, the Profound Sky sect, his emotions fluctuated greatly. He was unable to suppress it all at once, but he was actually sensed by the experts 5 miles away. Get out! After a loud shout, a sharp sword light suddenly shot out from the forest clearing. The sword light pierced through the sky and arrived in front of Xiang Nan in the blink of an eye. It was so fast that when Xiang Nan sensed it, the sword light almost pressed against the tip of Xiang Nan's nose. Xiang Nan hurriedly dodged with a flash step. He saw that the forest clearing was empty. Shit! They're coming! Xiang Nan flapped his wings and soared into the air. In the sky, a white-robed shadow was already floating. Chapter 264 Advancement and Retreat 2 Difficulties. The alertness of these people was simply too high. Xiang Nan was 5 miles away from them on the mountain peak, but his emotions were a little stronger, so they sensed him. Stop him! Don't let him escape! A white-clothed man shouted. Xiang Nan immediately used the flash steps to quickly leave the scene, but his body shook, and then with a buzz, he crashed into a Yuan Qi light shield. The white-clothed men formed a circle and surrounded Xiang Nan. Just as Xiang Nan was about to flee, they formed a spherical Yuan Qi barrier and trapped Xiang Nan inside. Shit! Xiang Nan's heart sank. After the collision just now, he had already sensed the strength of the Yuan Qi barrier. Judging from this, the dozen or so white-clothed men were probably all experts of the heavenly Yuan realm. The Yuan Qi light shield formed by the dozen or so heavenly Yuan realm experts was used to deal with Xiang Nan, a third-level origin returning martial cultivator. Not to mention making a big fuss, it could be seen how much they valued Xiang Nan. Truly trapped. A white-clothed man gently passed through the light barrier and entered. He stepped into the air and faced Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan's eyes narrowed slightly as he coldly said, "Are you people from the Profound Sky sect and the Flying Cloud sect?" The white-clothed man said, "Don't waste your effort. I won't reveal any information." Xiang Nan frowned, "Under your encirclement, I am already a dying person. Even so, do you still refuse to let me know who exactly killed me?" The white-clothed man's face was obscure in the shadows, but his tone was incomparably firm. "Don't say that you're a dying person. Even if you're already a corpse, don't dream of being able to hear anything from us. I want to fight him once." Xiang Nan and the white-clothed man were talking when one of the 5 black-clothed men suddenly stood up. This person also had Yuan Qi wings behind him, but it was different from Xiang Nan's. Xiang Nan's wings were Yuan Qi feathered wings, which looked more like a pair of crane wings and were snow white. The black-clothed man had a total of 3 pairs of 6 Yuan Qi wings. They were translucent in color, more like the wings of a certain dragonfly. The white-clothed man said to the black-clothed man, "Now is not the time for a battle of will. Killing a 12-sect contestant will increase your chances of winning the 12-sect championship." "What? Are you afraid that I won't be able to defeat Xiang Nan?" The black-clothed man was obviously not as disciplined as the white-clothed man, or rather, he had more of a martial artist's temperament. The white-clothed man gritted his teeth and shouted, "Our goal is to severely defeat the Haran sect, not let you show yourself here." "Haha." The man in black smiled. "Don't forget, the 5 of us are the core members of this operation. You are only serving the 5 of us." The white-clothed man's body was trembling slightly. It could be seen that he was angry, but as a Heaven Origin Realm martial artist, he did not dare to refute the face of the black-clothed man in the Origin Realm. Just as they were arguing internally, Xiang Nan immediately used the Void Stone. With a whoosh, his body turned into a streak of black lightning and instantly passed through the unbreakable Yuan Qi barrier. His entire body disappeared. This move shocked all the white-clothed and black-clothed people present. The white-clothed man was furious and pointed at the black-clothed man, "If it weren't for you obstructing me, I would have already killed Xiang Nan." The black-clothed man didn't care and said, "What's the hurry? I can't kill him now. I can still kill him in the arena." After saying that, he held his chin thoughtfully and said, Xiang Nan's strange movement technique just now was unexpected. He was actually able to pass through the visible Yuan Qi light shield. Could this be an escape technique? But after thinking for a while, the black-clothed man could not find any way to cast an escape spell. It was in this form. This time, Xiang Nan's lightning escape was more than 100 miles away. He had already surpassed the position of the Haoran sect. Afterwards, he endured the fierce headache and gradually lost consciousness and quickly flew back to the Haoran sect. He went straight to the Haoran palace to find his master, Su Kaiyu, and then asked Su Kaiyu to bring him to see Elder Shi Beihong. This is what happened. Xiang Nan told Elder Shi Beihong about his discovery in one breath. Elder, quickly send someone to chase after them. Xiang Nan said anxiously. Shi Beihong shook his head, it should be too late. They are well planned and cautious. They must have already disguised themselves and hid in Haotian City. But according to what you said, they should have been the ones who kidnapped Xueqi back then. Xiang Nan nodded and said, I suspect that this is a plan led by the Profound Sky sect and assisted by the Flying Cloud sect. Indeed. Elder Shi Beihong nodded solemnly, though the Profound Sky sect is originally one of the 8 great sections. Their wolf ambitions have never been broken. In the past 2 years, the Profound Sky sect has indeed expressed its desire to become the sect's boss. However, things have not gone smoothly. Looks like they are prepared to take the initiative to deal with the other 6 first-class sects this time. Our Haoran sect has always been the weakest of the 8 sects, so they should be the first target to attack. Xiang Nan frowned and said, I don't understand. Since they want to become a super sect and even try to annex us, why are they trying to participate in a 12-sect joint exam to discourage us? This doesn't make any sense. Could it be that you can become the boss after defeating the disciples of the Haoran sect in the 12-sect joint examination? Elder Shi Beihong shook his head, this is only the first step of their grand plan. The first step is to destroy the high status of our Haoran sect in the hearts of the Blue Tide Continent's martial artists. As long as this step succeeds, the Heavenly Profound sect's subsequent blow to us will follow one after another, and it will be twice the result with half the effort. Xiang Nan suddenly realized that this was the case. Once the Nature's vast sect was defeated, then the confidence in the hearts of the Blue Tide Continent's martial artists would collapse. In other words, as long as the Nature sect defeated the Heavenly Profound sect, no matter if the Heavenly Profound sect were to spread rumors or attack the Nature sect from the side, it would no longer cause any substantial harm to the Nature sect. Then let's hurry up and inform the participating disciples to be on guard. Xiang Nan said, but as soon as he finished speaking, he realized that his idea was untenable. Sure enough, Elder Shi Beihong shook his head and rejected, the current situation is that we do not know who those 5 black-clothed men are. At this stage, we cannot trust anyone. They may be disguised as Haoran sect disciples, or they may be disguised as outer sect disciples. Xiang Nan gritted his teeth. Yes, anyone could be one of the 5 black-clothed men. In fact, with the Profound Sky sect's powerful martial Dao status, even if they assumed that the person they bribed was Hong Bin, it wasn't impossible for them to do so. What if it was one of Feng Zhaoqi, Luo Yuan, and the others? Something's wrong. It's not possible. Xiang Nan shook his head forcefully. Impossible. Chapter 265 Martial Spirit, Dao Heart. Xiang Nan had also thought about whether to cancel the 12 joint examinations so that the Heavenly Profound sect's tricks would be frustrated. However, after careful consideration, the consequences of doing so were even worse. That way, the Profound Sky sect would be able to publicize it. Look at how useless the Howran sect is. The moment they heard that the Profound Sky sect had infiltrated the 12 joint examinations, they were so scared that they even cancelled the competition. This result was even more terrifying than the defeat of the Nature sect. There were no Heavenly Profound sect or Flying Cloud sect from the 9 firmaments continent on the list of the 12 joint examinations. If they wanted to defeat the ambitions of the Howran sect, they would definitely announce their identities at the arena competition. Of course, the Nature sect can directly disqualify them according to the rules. However, doing so is similar to cancelling the 12 joint examinations. It will also give everyone a signal that our Nature sect is afraid and we do not dare to fight. Therefore, no matter what, this battle was definitely going to be fought. No matter what. Elder Shi Beihong looked at Su Kaiyu and said, "Kaiyu, secretly search Haotian City. If you can find them, it would be best. If you can't find them, it's also the will of heaven. Since they have already arrived, we cannot retreat. We can only use our soldiers to cover up the water and earth." Yes. Su Kaiyu nodded and flew away like a ray of bright light. After Su Kaiyu left, Elder Shi Beihong said to Xiang Nan, "The only person I can trust now is you. They must have made sufficient preparations to dare to come here this time. They have an absolutely deep understanding of our Howran sect's experts. And you are a rising star. Their understanding of you shouldn't be too detailed. This is also one of your advantages. Don't worry, Elder. Even if Xiang Nan risked his life, he would still defend the reputation of the Nature sect." Xiang Nan said loudly. Even if Shi Beihong didn't say anything, Xiang Nan wouldn't be afraid on the spot. He was a member of the Profound Sky sect before, and in this life, the Profound Sky sect was Xiang Nan's #1 enemy. "Xiang Nan, follow me." As he spoke, Elder Shi Beihong turned around and put his loose sleeves behind his back as he walked deeper into the Howran palace. Xiang Nan didn't know why, so he could only follow respectfully behind. The hall of Howran was divided into many floors, and there was a huge building in the middle. Xiang Nan had once been tried by the Board of Elders here. However, Elder Shi Beihong and Xiang Nan had already passed through this place and were still continuing to walk deeper. This made Xiang Nan feel a little strange in his heart. When the two of them arrived at the last building in the deepest part of the Howran palace, the Howran sect's ancestral hall appeared here. Looking over, there was a respected stone statue on the table. There was only one tablet in the highest row with the words, "Heavenly Heart," written on it. This, Heavenly Heart, was not a name, but more like an introduction to someone's life. Other than that, there was no other word. There were a few rows below the Heavenly Heart ranking. Each tablet had a name written on it, followed by the next generation of elders, which side peak they belonged to. "Xiang Nan, kneel," Elder Shi Beihong said. Xiang Nan hurriedly knelt respectfully in front of the tablets. Shi Beihong looked at the plaques and sighed, "These are the ancestors and heroes who created the Howran sect. The highest plaque is the first-generation sect master of our Howran sect. He is determined to establish his heart with the heavens and plead for the people. He has been defending the righteous path all his life and being a dignified and upright martial artist for the country and the people. Even after his death, he is unwilling to leave his name behind. He only wishes to leave behind his spirit. He wants our Nature sect disciples to remember that there is not only a Nature sect ancestor in this world, but also tens of millions of martial artists with a strong and righteous heart." Hearing this, Xiang Nan immediately kowtowed 3 times to the ancestor martyr's tablets in shock. The life of the first sect master of the Haran sect must have been grand and vigorous, but Elder Shi Beihong only used 2 words to describe him. These 2 sentences directly describe the martial spirit of the first sect master and the depth of his Tao heart. Do you know why I brought you here? Elder Shi Beihong raised 2 fingers, and then a surge of sword qi suddenly took shape. The sharpness of the sword qi caused the air to tighten. It was as if everything in the world was as crisp as withered leaves in front of the sword qi. Looking at the sword qi, Xiang Nan's heart was incomparably shocked. This was the strength of a half-saint expert. Elder Shi Beihong said, I could have sent you a strand of sword qi that could at least instantly kill a Tianyuan 5th layer expert, but I would not do so. Do you know the reason? Xiang Nan said seriously, because I am a disciple of the Haran sect. Yes. Shi Beihong nodded and withdrew his sword qi, saying, the sect can be broken. But the martial soul in the hearts of our Haran sect martial artists cannot be broken. Win, win openly, lose openly, lose openly. I won't break the rules and give you powerful strength, but I can at least do it so that you can keep your life. Elder Shi Beihong flipped his palm, and 3 dots of light appeared in his palm. Then, the 3 dots of light flew into Xiang Nan's forehead with a whoosh. Shi Beihong said, these are my 3 strands of Yuan Qi. You can release them at critical moments. In total, they can be condensed into 3 Yuan Qi shields. They can withstand a fatal blow from a Tianyuan 5th layer expert at most. These 3 strands of Yuan Qi can't help you win, but they can help you escape the calamity of life and death. Thank you, Elder. Xiang Nan felt a splitting headache, but he still endured it and knelt down to thank Shi Beihong. Go, prepare well for tomorrow's arena competition. Elder Shi Beihong waved his hand. Xiang Nan kowtowed 3 more times to the ancestor martyr, then retreated backwards until he retreated from the door before turning around. Back then, Xiang Nan's original intention when he came to the Haran sect was to use the Haran sect as a springboard to search for a more powerful formula to increase his resistance to electricity. However, after less than a year, Xiang Nan truly had feelings for the Haran sect. He admired the martyrs of the Haran sect from the bottom of his heart. Perhaps the heavenly profound sect was very powerful, but they were unscrupulous and ignorant of the will of the righteous Tao, causing Xiang Nan to be shameless. Perhaps the Haran sect was only a first-class sect at the bottom, but the soul of this sect deeply moved Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan didn't even intend to use those 3 strands of Yuan Qi in the arena. Even if he died in battle, he couldn't lose face to the Haran sect. In the night, Xiang Nan clenched his fists tightly and said, this battle will be lost or dead. I will never surrender. On the 2nd day, the final part of the 12 joint examinations was officially kicked off. Xiang Nan followed the disciples of many sects to the tournament area of the Haran mountain range. At that time, tens of thousands of martial artists were already waiting. When they saw the 200 disciples flying in from the sky, they all gave their warmest applause. On this day, even the representatives of the 5 aristocratic families of Donghai province and the 4 great families of Haotian city had come. They used their astonishing financial resources to present gifts to every spectator present, as well as every participant and eliminated contestant. Every spectator who came to watch the match received a storage card of 10,000 gold coins, allowing them to spend as much as they could in Haotian City during the long arena competition, enjoying the best treatment here. Just this sum of money alone had already cost nearly 1 billion gold coins. That made the audience cheer. The contestants who had participated in the competition had even obtained VIP cards from the 5 great clans and the 4 great clans. In the next 3 years, they would receive an 80% discount on spending in any of the 9 factions industries. The 5 great clans and the 4 great clans had invested a lot of money this time. However, the more this happened, the more attention everyone paid to the 12 joint examinations. That was exactly what the Heavenly Profound sect wanted. Chapter 266 Legendary District. The mood of the audience, who had received the benefits, was unprecedentedly high, and the scene was filled with a joyous atmosphere. However, very few people knew that in the depths of this bustling scene, there was an undercurrent surging. All 200 contestants were present and began to draw lots. In the single-player arena competition, 2 contestants were in a group. In the top 100 advancement competition, 100 contestants would be eliminated in the first round. The first round of the top 100 advancement tournament was still divided into 10 regions. Each region had 5 matches in the morning and afternoon. In one day, they played 10 matches, eliminating a total of 100 people. The second round was the top 50 advancement tournament. At that time, the tournament area would be reduced to 2. There would only be 10 battles a day, and they would have to fight for 5 days, eliminating 50 people. In the third round, when the top 50 advanced to the top 26, the competition area shrunk again, turning into a ring. After that, the top 16, 8, and 4 were all in the same arena. Those who didn't have enough people would resurrect the contestants in the resurrection tournament. Perhaps, this first round of the 12 sect joint examination was destined to be an extraordinary one, and also the most dramatic one. This drama is reflected in the fact that Xiang Nan still won the 10th division. When the district referee wrote Xiang Nan's name on the stone stele beside the arena in the 10th division, the crowd applauded loudly. The 10th arena seemed to be a lucky arena. It had never been calm before. It had its own legendary experiences. At this moment, the representative from the Murong clan raised his right hand and shouted, "When the 12 joint examinations are over, I am willing to pay 100 million gold coins for the stone tablet in the 10th competition area." As soon as these words were spoken, the entire audience erupted into an uproar, and those wealthy and influential families were extremely regretful. 100 million gold coins was nothing to a large family in a prosperous area like the East China Sea. However, the Murong clan had already been the first to speak. Who would raise the price? He only hated that he hadn't thought of this. Xiang Nan turned around and looked in the direction of the Murong clan. He couldn't help but laugh in his heart. It seemed that Murong Chongshan had really sent someone to supervise him. If he had been eliminated early, the investment agreement between him and Murong Chongshan would have been cancelled. However, up until now, no news had come from Master. It should be that the search last night had failed, just as Elder Shi Beihong had expected. At this time, Murong Wanqing and the others walked over and greeted Xiang Nan affectionately. The 6 of them were getting closer and closer, and now they had become iron brothers. It was hard to imagine that when they first came to the Haran sect half a year ago, there was no room for fire or water, and they fought with each other. Xiang Nan. Murong Wanqing stood in front of Xiang Nan. She looked into Xiang Nan's eyes and held back for a long time before saying, "Come on." Ao. Luo Yuan hugged Xiang Nan's shoulder and joked, "Is this couple already so intimate? I rarely hear Sunset cheering for others. She always wants to win first place herself." Yes, the power of love. Shen Linhai pretended to be profound, as if he was an experienced romantic expert. Murong Wanqing's soft voice immediately changed. She said coldly, "If you want to die, just say it openly. I'll beat you to death right now." Finally, she added, "I was just worried that Xiang Nan would fail too early and be broken by my father." The rest of them were all smiling and tacit, which made Murom Wanqing's face flush red and she angrily turned around and left. "You guys are almost done." Xiang Nan smiled helplessly and said, "It's not like you don't know her character. You always joke around with her. Be careful that she really beats you up. I started to protect your little lover so quickly." Jiang Yu stabbed Xiang Nan's waist ambiguously. "I can't stand you guys." Xiang Nan rolled his eyes and walked towards Arena 10. Behind him came Luo Yuan's shameless sneer. The floating mountain in the 10 competition zones had already fallen. It had been replaced with a ring. Because the range of movements of martial artists was often large, the diameter of each ring was also 200 meters. This was to allow everyone to fully display their movement techniques. However, what Xiang Nan did not expect this time was that there was actually an old enemy of his in the 10th division, Hong Bin. Zhou Xianyong, Jiang Cheng, and the others were chatting around Hong Bin. When they saw Xiang Nan coming over, their expressions sank. Hong Bin strode towards Xiang Nan and sneered, "I hope to meet you in the first match." "Same to you." Xiang Nan replied indifferently. His heart was not focused on these personal grudges, but on keeping an eye on the behavior of others, trying to find the black-clothed men of the Profound Sky sect and the Flying Cloud sect. Could it be Hong Bin? Or was it Zhou Xianyong? If the Profound Sky sect wanted to bribe a Nature sect disciple, who would be their first choice? It should be Hong Bin, right? All right. In the sky, Elder Shi Beihong said loudly, "Please all the contestants return to their own areas. The competition is about to begin." Jiang Cheng and the others sneered as they passed by Xiang Nan. That Zhou Xianyong even used his shoulder maliciously to ruthlessly hit Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan was too lazy to be like these small-sighted people, so he directly dodged. Following that, the group began, and the 20 contestants from the 10th division drew lots. Xiang Nan drew the number 5, indicating that he was going to fight another number 5 contestant, the 5th match. In order to maintain the fairness of the competition, no contestant shall divulge his number before officially stepping onto the stage. In other words, Xiang Nan didn't know who his opponent was, or whether he had a certain chance of being assigned to the same group as Hong Bin. Alright, the 10th arena competition will officially begin. The district referee raised his right hand and shouted, "Contestant number 1, please come on stage." Xiang Nan looked at the arena and saw a shadow quickly flashing onto the arena. This person was Hong Bin. So he drew number 1. Xiang Nan nodded silently. Hong Bin immediately looked at Xiang Nan with a provocative look in his eyes. However, when he saw another contestant walking towards the arena, he couldn't hide his disappointment. Looks like this brat will be lucky enough to enter the top 100. Hong Bin's expression was unhappy. He hoped that he could kill Xiang Nan in the first round and stop Xiang Nan from entering the top 100. Only in this way would he be able to severely damage Xiang Nan's prestige. Haran sect, Hong Bin. Hong Bin introduced himself to his enemy. Hong Bin's opponent was a graceful man. The man held a 2-meter-long sword and said to himself, "Azure Cloud sect, Wu Kai." Hong Bin and Wu Kai were both experts at the 5th level of the Origin realm. As expected, they were similar to what Xiang Nan had expected. When it came to a tough battle like the arena competition, all of them were high-level martial artists. The 5th level of Origin return was the upper limit of the 12 joint examinations. These 5th level contestants were the true trump cards of the outer sect. Each outer sect sent over 100 disciples to participate in the battle, but they couldn't all be at the 5th level of Origin return. They still needed to do some face work, so they couldn't go too far. As for those outer sect disciples below the 5th level, they had already been wiped out in the first 2 stages. Hong Bin. Hong Bin. More than 30% of the crowd were focused on the 10th division. Not only was there a legendary Xiang Nan here, there was also the publicly acknowledged number 1 expert, Hong Bin. At this moment, almost 30% of the audience were cheering for Hong Bin. Only some of the disciples of the Azure Cloud sect were shouting Wu Kai's name. However, the voice was too weak and immediately drowned in the sound wave. Chapter 267 I Can't Watch Any Longer. In the sky, Elder Shi Beihong announced the rules of the arena. In arena matches, there was a limit of 1 hour. If a contestant died, surrendered, or fell out of the range of the arena, they would be considered eliminated. Due to the fact that Fushan was no longer isolated in this arena competition and the time limit had been greatly extended, contestants from each arena who had yet to participate in the competition or who had already completed the competition were allowed to join the arena. Everyone can leave their own arenas and watch the matches in other arenas. After everyone got their number plates, Zhou Xianyong, Chu Yan, and Yang Liener arrived at the 10th stage to watch Hong Bin's match. Jiang Qing did not come, but he did not play. He should have drawn for the 2nd or 3rd match and was ready to fight at any time. Hong Bin, let them experience the might of the nature sect. Zhou Xianyong hugged his shoulders and shouted, let them know that the words first-class sect are not for nothing. Zhou Xianyong's words were very ear-piercing. He exchanged his incomparably arrogant conceit for the shouts of the outer sect audience. Xiang Nan frowned and thought to himself, these people will never learn to be humble. When District 10 referee raised his right hand and signaled the match, Hong Bin hugged his shoulders and said to Wu Kai, disciple of the Azure Cloud sect, I'll let your 2 hands kill you within 3 moves. Blow your own trumpet. Wu Kai faintly became angry, you and I are both at the 5th level of the Origin Return realm. It's too early to say this. After saying that, Wu Kai bullied his way in. The sword shadow was extremely fast and almost arrived in front of Hong Bin in a flash. Hong Bin had been hugging his shoulders from beginning to end, but he suddenly raised his right leg, causing his leg to flash. He kicked Wu Kai's sword tip accurately, sending Wu Kai's sword flying. The crowd applauded loudly. The first time they clashed, Hong Bin displayed an incomparably powerful strength. However, Hong Bin seemed to have the intention to wash away Wu Kai. He did not chase after Wu Kai, but only watched him teasingly as he chased the sword back. After being humiliated, Wu Kai grabbed the sword and roared, "Swift bird, 3 shadows sword." As he spoke, Wu Kai's Yuan Qi surged. That Yuan Qi had actually turned pale green. This was one of the Azure Cloud sect's iconic techniques, the Azure Radiance technique. Wu Kai swung his sword and slashed down. In one slash, he unexpectedly slashed out 3 pale cyan sword lights side by side. He struck 10 times in a row, and the speed of his sword was extremely fast. In an instant, 30 sword lights shot towards Hong Bin. From the beginning, you used the powerful martial skill your sect gave you. Hong Bin's tone was full of teasing. When the outer sect came to participate in the battle, their sect would definitely teach him the strongest martial skill Wu Kai could learn at this stage. Xiang Nan nodded silently. At least Hong Bin was right. Perhaps Wu Kai didn't have enough contribution from the sect and wasn't qualified to learn the 3 Shadows sword, but for the sect joint examination, the Azure Cloud sect must have made an exception and taught it to him. This 3 Shadows sword should be able to display even more power, but Wu Kai's learning was too hasty, so it was obvious that its power had not been fully displayed. Even so, the 30 strong cyan sword beams still possessed a formidable power. Everyone was looking forward to how Hongbin would break this move. He saw that Hongbin was not idle when teasing Wu Kai. He raised his right foot high up and even reached the same level as his head. Then, a tiger head of Yuan Qi condensed on his right foot. Hu Wei is domineering. Hongbin shouted and stomped heavily on the ground. Roar! The moment the Yuan Qi tiger's head landed on the ground, a deafening tiger's roar burst forth. Looking at the 30 cyan sword lights, amidst the earth-shattering howls of the tigers, they were actually stuck in midair, unable to move forward at all. The 30 sword lights all emitted humming sounds, trembling extremely fiercely. Immediately after, all of the sword lights exploded at the same time, turning into specks of light that filled the sky. Hiss, the audience gasped. Heavens, did Wu Kai's sword light shatter just by his voice? The audience felt their scalps go numb. Xiang Nan's heart sank. The weak audience couldn't tell, but Xiang Nan could tell that Hongbin's move belonged to the sonic wave martial technique. This kind of martial skill was relatively rare and difficult to cultivate. Hongbin, you humiliate me. Wu Kai was both shocked and angry. As soon as the two of them exchanged blows, everyone could tell that Hongbin's strength was far above Wu Kai's. He could easily defeat Wu Kai, but he did not do so. Instead, he played tricks on Wu Kai like a cat playing with a mouse. A person like Hongbin, with a distinguished background and exceptionally strong martial arts talent, had been treated like the apple of the eye by the Hong clan ever since he was young, and had been spoiled by the Hong clan ever since he was young. Among his peers, almost no one could compare to him, and no one could beat him. This kind of person was used to trampling on others and enjoying playing tricks on the weak. A large part of their humanity was missing. They did not know what it meant to be kind to others, nor did they know what it meant to be sympathetic and compassionate. I'll humiliate you. What can you do? Hongbin hugged his shoulders and laughed heartily. Wu Kai's lips trembled with anger. Swift bird, Qinghai. As he finished speaking, his sword tip was wrapped in a wave of turbulent green yuan qi. This sword stabbed towards Hongbin, and there was actually a kind of shock that was like an ocean tide attacking him. Interesting. Hongbin laughed mockingly and immediately jumped up, kicking towards the mighty sword. Half of his right leg was condensed with yuan qi to form a radiant tiger head. The tiger's head roared, and it actually bit down on that rather powerful sword. Immediately after, Hongbin fell down with his body, and the tiger head bit the sword and stomped on the ground fiercely. Clang! With a crisp sound, the long sword fell flat to the ground. The power of this fall was like a tremendous overwhelming pressure, causing Wu Kai, who had risked his life, to be unable to pull out his sword. Worse still, Wu Kai was caught off guard. His right hand, which was holding the sword, was also pressed down on the arena by the hilt of the sword. It was fine if he could not take the sword. He could not even draw his hand away. Hongbin stepped on the long sword and looked down at Wu Kai, who was bent down to retrieve the sword, saying, "What? He can't even take back his weapon." Looking at this scene, Xiang Nan's expression was gloomy, but Zhou Xianyong and the others felt that it was very funny, all of them giggling. Chu Yan and Yang Lianer also covered their mouths and laughed. Xiang Nan took a deep breath and thought to himself, these people's humanity had already distorted. Hongbin. Let me go. Wu Kai tried to shatter the surface of the arena with his yuan qi and pulled his hand back, but Hongbin immediately poured more yuan qi into the arena. Wu Kai used his free left hand to attack Hongbin, but Hongbin actually stepped on the arena with his left hand. At this moment, Wu Kai's posture was extremely awkward. Both of his hands were on the ground, but his body was pouting backwards. To a dignified martial artist, this posture was simply a great humiliation. You want me to let you go? Hong Bin raised his eyebrows. Then you should use your strength to pull it back. What's the use of yelling here? Brothers, don't you think so? Zhou Xianyong laughed loudly. This useless trash dares to participate in the joint exam. It really makes people laugh out loud. Hong Bin, I'll fight you. Wu Kai's eyes were bloody red. Suddenly, the azure yuan qi in his body exploded. The increase in yuan qi had already exceeded his control. He was actually going to use a self-destructive method to fight Hong Bin to the death. No matter what, Xiang Nan couldn't watch any longer. He rushed onto the arena and quickly stabbed Wu Kai's neck with his right hand, suppressing the crazy yuan qi in Wu Kai's body. Hong Bin. Xiang Nan raised his head and said coldly, "You're enough. You can't kill anyone but Wu Kai. You don't know Wu Kai, so why would you humiliate him in front of all the martial artists in the world?" Chapter 268 Dark Horse. What, do you think I'm unhappy? Hong Bin hugged his shoulders and sneered, "I told you you didn't have any future. People like you pretend to be righteous all day long. What's there to sympathize with a weak person like Wu Kai? If you hang around with this kind of person all day, you'll have a chance to see the devil." Xiang Nan gritted his teeth and said, "Whether I have any future or not has nothing to do with you. But at least I am still a human. I have the feelings that a human should have. Xiang Nan, leave." The referee from the 10th server shouted. The gazes of Xiang Nan and Hong Bin collided fiercely in the air as they stepped down the arena. The referee announced loudly, "Although Wu Kai failed to self-destruct, he is already courting death. Wu Kai will be eliminated from Hong Bin's victory. Also, although Xiang Nan's purpose in disrupting the arena competition is to save people, he has already violated the rules. Remember to give him a serious warning. If he violates the rules again, he will be deemed to have automatically disqualified from the competition." At this moment, the applause was all for Xiang Nan. Although Xiang Nan had violated the rules, he had won the hearts of the people. Hong Bin gritted his teeth angrily. It was not easy for him to display his strength, but in the end, Xiang Nan stole the limelight. This tone made it difficult for him to swallow. "I always thought that I was already considered an arrogant and domineering playboy." Luo Yuan stood behind Xiang Nan with his shoulders crossed, "But compared to a beast like Hong Bin, I am simply a benevolent person who is willing to give." Wu Kai was about to self-destruct on impulse just now, but after calming down, he still had lingering fear in his heart. He walked over to Xiang Nan and said shamefully, "I'm sorry, Xiang Nan, but in order to save me, I let you be warned once." Xiang Nan patted Wu Kai on the shoulder and said, "The path of martial arts is difficult and dangerous. Often death will accompany us. We are both martial artists, so we are both descendants of the horizon. There is no need to worry about it." Wu Kai nodded bitterly. They are both descendants of the end of the heavens. Xiang Nan's words that the horizon had fallen into ruin spoke of the dangers and sorrows of the martial world. At this moment, these words touched the hearts of countless martial artists. Martial practitioners of the Tao of human capital enjoyed boundless scenery, but they knew what it was like to be cold and warm. In the distance, Yi Dong tilted his head slightly and listened to Xiang Nan's words. There was a complicated emotion in his eyes and he looked at Xiang Nan again. Those martial artists who could say these words were all people with stories. Xiang Nan. He's a man with flesh and blood. I support you. A loud roar came from the audience. Hong Bin walked down the arena and sneered as he walked past Xiang Nan, "Wait until you're beaten to death by me, I'll see if anyone can save you." "Cut the crap, you bastard. If you have the ability, see the real chapter, on the arena." Luo Yuan retorted. "Who the hell are you talking about?" Zhou Xianyong and the others rushed forward. "Speak of you." Luo Yuan's eyes flashed with coldness. "Spread out." The referee shouted, "No private battles outside the arena. Otherwise, a serious warning will be issued." Both sides were intolerant of fire and water, and each of them separated with a strong smell of gunpowder. "Let's go." Luo Yuan patted Xiang Nan's shoulder and said, "Sunset has already begun the race. Let's go and see if we can stay away from these animals so as to avoid getting stinky." As they spoke, the two of them arrived at arena number 7. Murong Wanqing was fighting against a disciple of her own sect. Murong Wanqing was at the late stage of the 3rd stage of the Origin Return sect. She had already stepped on the threshold of the 4th stage with half a foot, and her opponent was also a disciple of the Haran sect. She was at the 4th stage of the Origin Return sect. Perhaps only the Haran sect would honestly select disciples in the 12-sect joint examinations, and they would not simply choose the 5th-level Origin returning experts to compete. But at the same time, this also proved the confidence of the Nature sect. At this moment, Murong Wanqing's opponent was using the Qi sect's 3rd revolution astral Qi to explode a 10-meter-long Yuan Qi chain at Murong Wanqing. The chain flickered with afterimages, and countless broken shadows formed an airtight fan-shaped attack surface. Everyone was shocked at how powerful the Haran sect's martial skills were, and even more shocked that the Qi sect was able to play so many tricks on Yuan Qi, causing them to be incomparably admired. The manipulation of Yuan Qi is not bad, but its strength is lacking. Murong Wanqing held her sword in her hand and rushed into the chain's afterimage array. Her sword trembled, and a wave of Yuan Qi immediately exploded from the sword. Countless chain afterimages landed on the air waves, producing a dense explosion sound, but they were unable to break through. Murong Wanqing had already arrived in front of the enemy. The tip of her sword was slanted, piercing through the Yuan Qi in the enemy's hand. Then, she took half a step forward and placed a palm on the enemy's chest, knocking the Haran sect disciple out of the arena. Xiang Nan and Luo Yuan clapped their hands to congratulate him. In the spectator stands, some outer sect elders were whispering to each other. Then Murong Wanqing's martial Dao foundation is too good. She actually won by a crushing advantage against her opponent at the 4th level of Origin Return with her 3rd level of Origin Energy. This girl's kung fu is very solid. You can't underestimate her. Xiang Nan turned around and took a look. He had already entered the 3rd match in the 10th server, and there was only one more match left for him. Who exactly are those 5 black-clothed men? Xiang Nan pondered in his heart and began to swiftly swim through the 10 competition areas. He paid close attention to every contestant in the competition, trying to find some clues about the heavenly profound sect martial artists. Xiang Nan was too familiar with the Yuan Qi fluctuations of the heavenly profound sect. He didn't need to look at them, he could tell with just a slight Yuan Qi fluctuation. But strangely, no matter how he sensed it, he didn't get anything. Perhaps up until now, no disciples of the heavenly profound sect have come on stage. Xiang Nan could only return to the 10th region first. The 4th battle had already begun there, and it was his turn. The two sides in this 4th battle were Yi Dong from the Haran sect's Qi sect and Zhang Qinglin from the Wind Moon sect. The Wind Moon sect was a rather unique sect. Its founding ancestor was said to be a powerful woman who had walked out of the Haran sect. The current Wind Moon sect's sect head was quite close to Su Kaiyu. The reason why they said they were independent was because the Wind Moon sect only recruited female disciples, and male disciples were not allowed. Because of this relationship, Xiang Nan had a faint feeling of intimacy towards the people of the Wind Moon sect. However, Xiang Nan was more concerned about Yi Dong. At this moment, Yi Dong was showing his strength. He was a third-level origin returning martial artist. In fact, his strength wasn't that high in a second-grade academy. As for that Wind Moon sect beauty, Zhang Qinglin, she was at the 5th level of origin return. Xiang Nan frowned, trying to see Yi Dong's true and false appearance. This Yi Dong had always given Xiang Nan an unfathomable feeling. At this moment, the referee announced the battle. Zhang Qinglin held 2 crescent blades in his hand. The blade was a meter long, and because of the large arc, it was shorter. She crossed the 2 crescent blades, then slashed forward. The 2 blades separated, and the 2 intersecting blade lights flew towards Yi Dong in the shape of an X. Yi Dong, on the other hand, kept his head lowered, his right hand behind his back, and his left hand suddenly released a palm strike. Then, he turned around and walked down the arena. Everyone was slightly stunned, but what happened next moved the audience. 1 palm. A palm light that emitted a high intensity of light directly shattered Zhang Qinglin's blade light and instantly imprinted it on Zhang Qinglin's stomach, blasting her out of the arena. That Yi Dong had already lifted his leg and walked under the arena. When he reached the edge of the arena and lifted his last step, Zhang Qinglin fell off the arena. Almost at the same time, Yi Dong also took a step out of the arena. Whether it was the strength of his palm, the control of the timing, or the scene where Yi Dong lowered his head and stepped down from the stage with only a single step away from Zhang Qinglin, all of them were shocking. Xiang Nan's heart sank. So strong. Chapter 269 Power Display. Please enter the 10th stage, 5th contestant. Following the referee's announcement, Xiang Nan walked towards the arena, but he kept looking sideways at Yi Dong's back. Could it be him? Yi Dong was using the pure 3-revolution astral qigong technique of the Nature's Nature sect, making it impossible for Xiang Nan to determine whether Yi Dong was a black-clothed person or not. However, the more troublesome part was that Xiang Nan did not know that the 5 black-clothed men had been sent to the Haran sect as mole. Or was it that they had always been in the Haran sect and had been bribed by the Profound Sky sect? If it was the former, then they would definitely understand the Heavenly Profound sect's cultivation method. This was easier to judge, but if it was the latter, it would be much more troublesome. Of course, the former was the most likely because they had to maintain their status as disciples of the Heavenly Profound sect. Otherwise, at most, it would be the Haran sect disciples who defeated the Haran sect disciples. Xiang Nan thought about this quickly, but he didn't notice that the battle had already begun. Yi Dong does not possess the characteristics of the Heavenly Profound sect's cultivation techniques. Perhaps they are prepared to wait until the late stage of the arena competition before revealing their identities. Xiang Nan, where are you looking? A loud shout rang out, followed by a huge figure running towards Xiang Nan. Only then did Xiang Nan turn around and face his opponent head-on. Xiang Nan's opponent was a strong man who was about 2.1 meters tall. The strong man was naked and his muscles were tense. He was filled with a sense of strength. Especially since this person's realm was very high, he was at the 5th level of the Origin Return realm, the highest level of the tournament. Xiang Nan was distracted just now and didn't notice which sect this strong man belonged to or what his name was. At this moment, the burly man took large strides and ran towards Xiang Nan. At this moment, a burst of exclamation came from the scene. Because as the strong man ran, there seemed to be a faint shadow of a tail behind him. The tail's shadow was like a snake's tail, reaching an astonishing length of 5 meters. Ha! Xiang Nan's gaze narrowed as he casually drew out his huge saber and slashed it down at the strong man. Ha 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 ha! The burly man laughed wildly. This level of attack is simply not enough. The burly man suddenly crossed his hands and pushed his body towards Xiang Nan's giant saber. In that instant, the strong man's arms suddenly shone with yuan qi, condensing into scales. Those scales were so exquisite that even patterns could be seen on the surface. Clang! Xiang Nan's great saber slashed into the strong man's arms, producing a metallic collision sound, and at the same time, a spark burst out. This saber strike did not break through the strong man's defense at all, and the strong man was still running, using both of his arms to push the blade of the giant saber forward. Xiang Nan was pushed backwards by the tremendous force, and his feet rubbed against the ground with 2 shallow scratches. One had to know that the combat arena was made of mixed earth crystal stones. It was used to forge expensive earth crystal stones that were known for their sturdiness. In addition, it was forged from 3 other ore materials. The strength of the arena was extremely high. From this, it could be seen how shocking the strength of that strong man was. Seeing that Xiang Nan was about to be pushed to the edge of the arena, once he fell, he would lose the qualifications to compete. Looks like Xiang Nan is having a hard time fighting. Shen Linhai and Feng Zhaoqi watched the battle from below the arena. Shen Linhai frowned slightly. Although Xiang Nan is very strong, his weakness is also very clear. It is his realm. No matter what, Xiang Nan was still only a 3rd-level origin realm martial artist. There was no denying that he had a natural disadvantage when fighting against a 5th-level origin realm opponent. This kid. Feng Zhaoqi saw that Xiang Nan had already been pushed to the edge of the arena and would fall down half a meter away. At this moment, Xiang Nan, who was sliding backwards, suddenly took a step back and stepped on the edge of the arena. His heels were already floating in the air. The sturdy man's eyes already revealed the joy of victory. However, the strength of Xiang Nan's kick was astonishing. After stepping on the edge of the arena, his body did not move back at all. Ha! The sturdy man's eyes moved and he found that he could no longer push Xiang Nan, as if Xiang Nan's feet had taken root on land. Blazing Fire Sect. Xiang Nan looked at the strong man calmly. He had already discovered the characteristics of the Blazing Fire Sect's cultivation technique. The martial arts and techniques of the Blazing Fire Sect were mostly related to snakes. This could be seen from Wang Xiaoyun back then, but now, whether it was the long shadow of the snake tail behind the strong man or the snake scales on his arms, they all showed this point. "Brat, you have good taste," the burly man shouted, and the snake tail behind him lifted high into the air, and then landed on the ground with a loud boom. This giant tail strike gave the burly man an instant's explosive charge. The entire arena trembled violently. He wanted to use this momentum to drive Xiang Nan out. The audience became nervous and prayed in their hearts that Xiang Nan must not be eliminated in the first round of the arena competition. "Ha! Scram!" the burly man shouted. Originally, he wanted to say scram, but no matter what, he couldn't say the word bar. This was because when he used the power of the giant tail to push his power onto Xiang Nan's saber, Xiang Nan still didn't move at all. Xiang Nan's right foot, which had its heel suspended in the air, was as steady as a mountain. This is impossible." A trace of panic appeared in the sturdy man's eyes. "I don't believe it." The burly man was enraged. He roared, and the huge tail behind him kept falling. He lifted it up and fell. Burst after burst of explosive strikes smashed open numerous fine cracks on the arena floor behind him. Wave after wave of terrifying collision force was continuously exerted on Xiang Nan. However, in the fiercely shaken arena, Xiang Nan still did not retreat a single step. Xiang Nan narrowed his eyes and said, "If this is the limit of your strength, then I think you can admit defeat." After saying that, Xiang Nan suddenly lowered his body's center of gravity. His legs were in a horse-step posture, and the huge saber in his right hand suddenly jumped into the sky. The burly man was actually sent flying, and his body continuously rotated more than 10 times in midair. Wow! The audience stood up together. Shen Linhai looked at this scene in disbelief. What's this kid's strength? What surprised the audience was none other than Xiang Nan's strength. If Xiang Nan had used a martial skill to provoke the strong man away, the visual impact might not have been strong. The key was that Xiang Nan and the strong man had clashed head-on. He had used the purest strength to provoke the strong man away. However, strength was precisely the strongest advantage of that strong man. Xiang Nan turned the giant saber in his hand half a circle and walked towards the sturdy man. After consuming the body-tempering pill, Xiang Nan had endured a full month of pain, and at this moment, its effects were undoubtedly revealed. Chapter 270 Beauty of Power. Back then, Wang Xiaoyun was also at the 5th level of origin return. Xiang Nan walked towards the strong man step by step, but in the middle of the journey, he carried his huge saber diagonally. What? Is he planning to use no weapons? The audience shouted in shock. But now, I am no longer what I used to be. Xiang Nan walked to the center of the arena and waved to the strong man, "Come on, use your full strength." The sturdy man was first shocked and angry, then his expression became excited. He raised both of his hands high up and his entire body was covered with scales condensed from yuan qi, and these scales were only found on his arms just now. What was even more shocking was that the shadow of a black-eyed king snake stood up outside the burly man. The eyeglasses king snake's phantom was over 5 meters tall, enveloping the sturdy man. Back then, Wang Xiaoyun was only able to condense the shadow of the black viper when he used the Earth Fiend Snake King sword, but it was the shadow that appeared behind him. The strong man's state was quite similar to Hong Bin's fierce yuan qi tiger. They were all illusory shadows that enveloped his body. Ah, I remember. He's Meng Hao. Someone in the spectator stands cried out loudly and said, "This is bad. Xiang Nan is in danger." When the sturdy man used this move, everyone recalled that in the previous round of elimination matches, this blazing fire sex Meng Hao had once fought against Hong Bin. That time, Meng Hao had displayed an incomparable terrifying power. Although he had lost to Hong Bin in the end, he had lost so fiercely that it left an indelible impression on everyone. "Ha, it's that brat." In the distance, beneath Arena 8, Hong Bin was watching Chu Yan's battle. When he heard the cheers, he turned around and saw Meng Hao. If it was Meng Hao, Xiang Nan would probably lose, right? "Xiang Nan, quickly use your weapon." Shen Linhai also shouted, "This Meng Hao is very powerful. He once forced Hong Bin to use all of his strength." All of his strength? Xiang Nan raised his eyebrows slightly. "Xiang Nan, let me tell you, I only used 4 parts of my strength just now." Meng Hao took large strides and rumbled towards Xiang Nan. The image of the king eyeglasses serpent enveloped him. The giant head of the serpent was raised high and majestic. "Take this punch from me." When Meng Hao was only 10 meters away from Xiang Nan, he jumped off the ground. He clenched his fists together and smashed both of his arms towards Xiang Nan. The eyeglasses king snake phantom in midair straightened its body, then followed Meng Hao's heavy punch and ferociously slammed down on Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan calmly raised his left arm. Oh! He actually wanted to use his thin left arm to block Meng Hao's heavy blow. The audience shouted endlessly. Meng Hao's arms smashed down with terrifying power, even carrying a howling wind. Boom! Meng Hao's thick and shocking arms landed heavily on one of Xiang Nan's left arms, causing an earth-shattering tremor to echo out. However, the audience's eyes widened, and their eyeballs almost flew out. Meng Hao's terrifying attack actually failed to send Xiang Nan flying. Xiang Nan even raised his left arm, his body motionless. It was just that the arena beneath his feet, with Xiang Nan as the center, had a crack ring that was 3 meters in diameter. Ka, the arena under Xiang Nan's feet was filled with fine cracked rocks that flew into the air. Why? Meng Hao was stunned. To be honest, I only used 3 parts of my strength just now. As Xiang Nan spoke, he grabbed onto Meng Hao's left arm with his right hand. As Xiang Nan's waist twisted, he gathered all the strength in his body into his right hand. Whoosh! Under everyone's gaze, Meng Hao was sent flying by Xiang Nan. Nonsense! I don't believe it. Meng Hao landed on the ground and threw himself back at Xiang Nan. He raised his right arm high and shouted, "Earth Fiend, Mountain-Splitting Pestle." The ferocious scales on his right arm flickered with intense light, and his entire right arm suddenly expanded to nearly 2 meters long. This arm and his body were completely out of proportion. When his right arm descended towards Xiang Nan, the pressure it exerted was extremely shocking. Before his right arm completely descended, a strong wind had already blown up on the arena. A fierce gale descended from the sky, fiercely pressing down on Xiang Nan's body. Xiang Nan remained motionless. His feet firmly grasped the ground, using Yuan Qi to strengthen the strength of the arena, and he raised his hands at the same time. Meng Hao's terrifying overweight arm smashed into Xiang Nan's arms. Boom! A surge of energy violently dispersed in all directions. The tremendous recoil caused by this collision actually shook the arena 200 meters in diameter to the point that it jumped a full inch off the ground. However, everyone discovered that Xiang Nan was still standing firmly on the ground after the wave of qi dissipated. He resisted. He resisted Meng Hao's mountain-splitting pestle. Just as Meng Hao's face was filled with shock, his feet landed on the ground. Xiang Nan gently jumped, his right hand formed a knife, and with a cracking sound, he struck Meng Hao's left shoulder. This saber actually sliced Meng Hao to the ground, causing him to kneel on one leg. His knees collided with the arena, producing a muffled sound. Xiang Nan rolled over and landed behind Meng Hao. His right leg condensed Yuan Qi, and he kicked Meng Hao in the back. As Meng Hao was kicked forward, Xiang Nan leapt into the air again, crossing Meng Hao's body and landing right in front of him. Meng Hao borrowed the strength of his pounce, and his fist, the size of a casserole, shot towards Xiang Nan's heart. Xiang Nan crossed his arms in front of his chest, using both of his forearms to clamp onto Meng Hao's large, unbalanced arm. Then, he took a bow and pushed Meng Hao's right arm down. Meng Hao's enormous right arm and elbow were pressed to the ground by Xiang Nan. Meng Hao snorted in pain. He reached out his left hand to grab Xiang Nan's face. His large hand was much larger than Xiang Nan's face. Xiang Nan raised his left hand and grabbed Meng Hao's wrist, preventing him from moving at all. This scene was too strange. Compared to their arms, Meng Hao's was like a tree, while Xiang Nan's arm was like a thin branch. This completely disproportionate confrontation caused such an astonishing visual contrast. This time, I used 70% of my strength. What about you? Xiang Nan asked Meng Hao. He loosened his hands and said, I respect every martial artist, so I'll give you a chance to see my full power attack. Meng Hao was stunned for a moment, and then he roared excitedly, good. So happy. I like to go straight to and fro with men like you. Strength-type martial artists were most annoying to speed-type martial artists, or those martial artists who didn't directly collide with them and jumped around randomly. Obviously, they preferred to face each other head-on. They believed that only a struggle of strength was what a man should do. Meng Hao jumped 20 meters backwards. He raised his right hand high, and the large phantom of the King Eyeglasses snake instantly retracted into his body. At that moment, Meng Hao's entire body emitted a strange aura, and the air around him was filled with the grinding sounds of poisonous snakes spitting out messages. Come on! Meng Hao roared as he charged at Xiang Nan. Every time his big foot stepped on the ground, the arena would ring again. Chapter 271 Sword Dao Expert. This time, Meng Hao's charge was completely different from the previous ones. He had absorbed the phantom image of the Eyeglasses King Snake, and this charge was clearly a martial skill. Not a simple collision. Earth Fiend, Mountain Opening Tombstone. As Meng Hao charged forward, his body suddenly expanded. His entire body was like an incomparably large iron fist. Body Tyrant Lightning Drive. Xiang Nan also used the tyrannical Body Lightning Drive to face Meng Hao, and the Azure Dragon went out to sea. Pang! Xiang Nan's entire body began to burn, colliding head-on with the iron fist like Meng Hao. Boom! The terrifying collision immediately caused an astonishing Yuan Qi shock wave to explode. The ring-shaped shock wave frantically spread out, causing the martial artists fighting on the stage to have no choice but to erect Yuan Qi shields. At the center of the arena, a flaming Xiang Nan and an invincible Meng Hao collided. Xiang Nan quickly retreated for a walk. Meng Hao, on the other hand, was like a kite with a broken string, falling to the edge of the arena behind him. Everyone was in an uproar. So happy. Meng Hao stood up again. He coughed out 2 large mouthfuls of blood. Then, he used his sharp fingernails to cut open his wrists. Blood flowed strangely into the air. Blood sacrifice. Xiang Nan nodded slightly. He had already witnessed the blood sacrifice of the blazing fire sect once. Fresh blood gathered in the sky and fell onto Meng Hao's body. The red blood caused the scales on his body to more than double in size. He once again activated the mountain opening tombstone martial skill. This time, his body actually started to burn. Xiang Nan raised his left hand and a narrow beam of sunlight landed on his hand. Immediately, the power of the sun covered his entire body. The Azure Dragon went out to sea. Xiang Nan faced Meng Hao's ultimate charge and rushed out. The two of them did not have any dazzling moves, they were simply clashing head-on. Boom! The two of them met again in the middle of the arena, and their right shoulders collided with each other. Half of it was flames soaring into the sky, and the other half was radiant. Meng Hao felt as if he had crashed into an iron mountain. The skeleton of his right arm instantly cracked open, and his entire body was blasted backwards by the collision. Xiang Nan fiercely stomped on the ground, using it to fix his body. This kick was incredibly powerful, and it actually trampled the entire surface of his foot into the arena. He forcefully stepped on a 3-inch deep footprint. Meng Hao was knocked out of the arena, and Xiang Nan was standing in the middle of the arena. The audience cheered and whistled. Meng Hao lay weakly on the ground. 2 streaks of red snow appeared from his mouth, but he was still laughing loudly. Xiang Nan, this daddy was completely convinced of my defeat. This daddy fought so well. Chengjian. Xiang Nan cupped his fists at Meng Hao and walked down the arena. At this time, the referee of the 10th division announced, in the first half, 5 matches are over. The winner of the 5th match, Xiang Nan. Damn it, since when did you have such powerful strength? Shen Linhai rushed forward and punched Xiang Nan's chest. Did you train your body in the cultivation tower? Yes. Xiang Nan nodded and smiled. However, that Meng Hao is indeed very strong. This time, I have really used all my strength. I have no reservations. I'm afraid it's just strength. Feng Zhaoqi's words shattered the mystery. Xiang Nan only used the strongest strength, but he didn't say that he used the strongest Yuan Qi and the strongest martial skill. Moreover, Xiang Nan was not a strength-type martial artist. After everyone took a short break, the second half of the afternoon began. Xiang Nan's battle today was all over. He had successfully entered the top 100, so he went to watch other people's matches. The battle between Feng Zhaoqi, Shen Linhai, and Jiang Yu was held in the afternoon. Shen Linhai was the first match in the afternoon. Without exception, he easily won the battle. After him, Mo Hai and Li Qingchuan also fought a match one after another. The 2 of them, as rare 3rd-grade sect disciples, actually each won a match. Xiang Nan, we succeeded. Mo Hai and Li Qingchuan ran over and shouted excitedly. Congratulations on entering the top 100. From now on, we will be fellow disciples, Xiang Nan said happily. Hey, it's just that entering the nature sect this time feels like it won't be a match for a martial artist. Mo Hai chuckled. If it weren't for the fact that I encountered a weaker opponent in this arena competition, I would probably have lost. After outer sect disciples entered the top 100, they would be accepted by the Haoran sect. Of course, this was only a reward. Normally, with their talent and aptitude, there was still a small gap between them and entering the Haoran sect. Xiang Nan advised, there is no need to underestimate yourself. After you come to the nature sect, you can go to the saber sect to learn the primordial astral qi. With this technique, you will be like a tiger adding wings. As for Qing Chuan, he can enter the sword sect. Let's go. It's time to summon qi. Let's go take a look. The group of people walked towards arena number 2. Feng Zhaoqi, Xianyang Peak of Nature's nature sect, disciple of the sword sect, late Guiyuan 3rd layer. Meanwhile, Feng Zhaoqi's opponent was Yan Fei, a 5th level origin returning expert from the 2nd grade sect, the Quicksand sect. Coincidentally, both of them were sword Dao experts. Xiang Nan was still looking forward to Feng Zhaoqi's battle. On the arena, Feng Zhaoqi and Yan Fei were already standing opposite each other. The referee of the second arena simply repeated the rules of the match and ordered the start of the match. I heard that you are very strong with your sword. Yan Fei carried a heavy sword on his back and walked towards Feng Zhaoqi. The heavy sword was as wide as a palm, 2 meters long, and 2 fingers thick. Feng Zhaoqi's sword, on the other hand, was quite common. The width of a 3-fingered sword, the length of 1.5 meters, and the thickness of the sword were less than half a finger. This Yan Fei is not simple. I'm afraid that Xiang Nan and Zhao Qi are the strongest opponents in the first round. After Luo Yuan's race was over, he also ran over to watch the battle. The opponents they encountered weren't very strong, so they easily won. However, Meng Hao and Yan Fei, whom Xiang Nan had encountered, were two experts who had performed very well in the team tournament. Please. Feng Zhaoqi held the sword in his hands and said indifferently. Yan Fei had already walked 20 meters in front of Feng Zhaoqi and said, I have offended you. As he spoke, the giant sword in Yan Fei's hand stretched forward. The thick sword was actually clanging a few times, splitting into 5 2-meter slender swords. Luo Yuanqi said, Yan Fei didn't seem to have used this move before. I didn't expect his sword to be a combination. Among the 5 swords, Yan Fei held the core sword in the middle, while the other 4 were wrapped in strange yuan qi, slowly revolving around the core sword. The quicksand sex yuan qi is indeed very unique. Xiang Nan nodded silently. The yuan qi wrapped around the 4 swords had a strong stickiness. Only by cultivating a specific cultivation technique would a martial artist's yuan qi attribute undergo a fundamental change. Without hesitation, Yan Fei immediately waved his hand and attacked Feng Zhaoqi. Feng Zhaoqi finally grasped the hilt of the sword. He grabbed the sheath with his left hand and gently pushed the hilt open with his right thumb, revealing the blade of the inch sword. Chapter 272 Quicksand. The sword should be the most flexible of all weapons. The swords were divided into long swords, short swords, wide blade swords, heavy swords, giant swords, and soft swords. The difference between a heavy sword and a giant sword was that a heavy sword had no edge and relied more on its striking power, while a giant sword's use was more similar to a knife. It could be said that weapons like swords could adapt to the vast majority of martial skills and moves, and there were many variations. Throughout the ages, countless martial artists had developed dazzling and endless uses of the sword. Many martial artists were more willing to change when they used their swords, using sword techniques to catch the enemy off guard. Obviously, Yan Fei belonged to this type of change-seeking, but Feng Zhaoqi was a traditional expert in the sword Dao. At this moment, Yan Fei had already pushed towards Feng Zhaoqi. The core longsword in his hand suddenly stabbed, and the 4 auxiliary longswords immediately split apart and attacked Feng Zhaoqi in different ways. The 2 long swords split left and right, circled around Feng Zhaoqi's body, and suddenly stabbed down. The 2 long swords split up and attacked from the upper and lower paths. The core longsword was held in Yan Fei's hand, waiting for Feng Zhaoqi's flaw at any moment. Facing the different angles of the 4 swords, Feng Zhaoqi took a bow step forward with his left leg. His right hand quickly twitched the hilt of the sword, but he did not know how many times it twitched. The speed was simply too fast. At the same time, Yan Fei's 4 swords were slashed to the ground at the same time. So fast. Li Qingchuan sucked in a breath of cold air. He was also a martial artist who used a sword. He was shocked and said, after the joint examination, you must ask Zhao Qi for advice on using the sword. After Feng Zhaoqi shot down the 4 swords, the scabbard in his left hand immediately changed directions and aimed the hilt at Yan Fei. Then, he drew his sword again with his right hand. Until today, Xiang Nan remembered that he didn't seem to have seen Feng Zhaoqi's sword in its entirety. Every time, he only saw a small section of the sword. Really fast. Yan Fei quickly took half a step back. His right sword suddenly jerked, and the 4 swords on the ground suddenly came to life and flew back to his side. The 4 swords revolved around Yan Fei at high speed, and a series of clashing sounds could be heard. The 4 swords blocked almost all of Feng Zhaoqi's attacks. But, there was only one sword that didn't block it, leaving a long, shallow sword wound on Yan Fei's chest. Blood had already begun to emerge. Yan Fei quickly took 2 steps forward and his body soared into the air. He slashed 3 times at Feng Zhaoqi with the posture of hanging his head and feet upside down. One of the 4 swords rotated on its own, turning into a wheel that sliced towards Feng Zhaoqi. A long sword was raised high up and descended from the sky, slashing down vertically. A long sword radiance was fierce, as if it was being grabbed by an invisible person, wildly slashing from all angles. The last long sword softened and circled around Feng Zhaoqi like a silk satin. Occasionally, it would go up to probe and try to wrap around Feng Zhaoqi's body. Feng Zhaoqi lowered his head and suddenly disappeared. Immediately after, he appeared behind Yan Fei and quickly drew his sword with his right hand. Chi! The sound of air splitting rang out, and Yan Fei was directly slashed to the ground, leaving behind a bone-deep sword wound on his back. Li Qingchuan was stunned. He drew his sword so quickly, but he even moved as quickly as he did. Quicksand. Just as Feng Zhaoqi was about to land and deliver another fatal blow to Yan Fei raised his head with an unusually cold smile on his face. He shouted the word quicksand, causing everyone to feel puzzled, but what happened next exceeded everyone's expectations. It's Yuan Qi fluctuations. Xiang Nan immediately saw the anomaly. Just now, when Yan Fei was in midair, he had actually left behind an invisible Yuan Qi in the air. When Feng Zhaoqi slashed down Yan Fei and was about to attack again, the invisible Yuan Qi in the air poured down like a downpour. Splashed all over Feng Zhaoqi's body. Immediately after, Feng Zhaoqi was thrown to the ground, as if he had been thrown with a bucket of incomparably viscous solution. This kind of Yuan Qi was extremely viscous, and its astonishing viscosity caused Feng Zhaoqi's movements to become much slower. Especially after his feet landed on the ground, the viscous Yuan Qi actually stuck to the arena floor. It made Feng Zhaoqi's leg movements extremely difficult. Holy shit! Luo Yuan exclaimed, "What kind of exaggerated technique is this? Hey!" Yan Fei endured the intense pain behind his back and stood up. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said, "Feng Zhaoqi, you've been tricked." As he spoke, he slashed down with his sword, and the 4 long swords sliced towards Feng Zhaoqi at the same time. Feng Zhaoqi moved his body and tried to dodge the attack, but the stickiness under his feet and on his body slowed his speed by 2/3. If a speed-type sword Dao martial artist lost 2/3 of his speed, it would be a devastating blow. It's bad. Shen Linhai's heart sank. At this moment, a sharp light suddenly burst out from Feng Zhaoqi's body. It was the Xiantian Dipper Qi of the Sword Sect. Xiantian Astral Qi carried an incomparably sharp attribute. The moment Xiantian Astral Qi burst out, the viscous Yuan Qi in Feng Zhaoqi's entire body was cut to pieces. The 4 swords were also sent flying by the pure Xiantian Astral Qi. On Yan Fei's front body, the sword Qi condensed from the perceptive Xiantian Dipper Qi had sliced out 4 sword wounds in a row. Blood mist suddenly spilled down. Ha! That Yan Fei was seriously injured, but he still laughed loudly. "I had already expected this move of yours. A lot of Yuan Qi fluctuations." A flash of lightning flashed through Xiang Nan's eyes. It was still a scheme. Yan Fei deliberately stalled for time. At this moment, the sky was already filled with viscous Yuan Qi fluctuations. At this moment, Yan Fei raised his hands high and shouted, "Quicksand world." His hands abruptly lifted downwards, and an overwhelming amount of Yuan Qi descended from the sky. Giggling sounds could be heard endlessly, sprinkling down onto the entire arena, drenching Feng Zhaoqi's entire body. The viscous Yuan Qi was attached to the entire surface of the arena, but it was wriggling and wriggling as it cooked. Feng Zhaoqi released the Xiantian astral qi once more. The sharp yuan qi cut the viscous yuan qi around his body hundreds of times in a row. Nearly 100 faults have been cut out. However, the trouble was that the arena was covered with viscous yuan qi. Wherever he cut, a new viscous yuan qi filled it. Feng Zhaoqi took a step forward, but when he raised his right leg, the sticky yuan qi connected to his right foot and the yuan qi on the surface of the arena. The yuan qi was pulled into a long, tendon shape. After the tendon was pulled high, the stretching force reached its limit and pulled Feng Zhaoqi's right leg back. What the hell is this? Li Qingchuan's eyes widened as if he had seen a ghost. Huh, come on. Yan Fei swung the sword in his hand, and a thick strand of yuan qi immediately stuck to Feng Zhaoqi's sword. Following that, Yan Fei pulled the sword back, and the yuan qi snatched Feng Zhaoqi's sword away. Chapter 273 Qi Sect. Huh, eat my sword. Yan Fei laughed wildly and raised the sword in his right hand. Immediately after, the 4 long swords quickly returned. The clanging clanged against the core sword, reassembling into a giant sword. Immediately after, the giant sword descended from the sky. The champion of the 12 joint examinations is mine. No one is my opponent. Yan Fei seemed to have seen the final victory and couldn't help but be ecstatic. But at this moment, Feng Zhaoqi suddenly closed his eyes. Immediately afterwards, the yuan qi that adhered to his body began to rapidly fall off. The yuan qi seemed to have been cut off by an invisible sword blade, but what everyone saw with their naked eyes was that Feng Zhaoqi didn't even have a sword in his hand. As for Xiantian Dipper Qi, it only had a sharp attribute on it, but it was simply unable to do so. Sword intent. The veins on Li Qingchuan's excited forehead bulged. It's sword intent. That Feng Zhaoqi actually cultivated sword intent. Sword intent was a very abstract concept. It was said that this thing had nothing to do with cultivation realms, but was related to the hearts of sword Dao experts. Sword intent, it could also be called, heart intent becoming a sword. Even Yan Fei was shocked, but then he laughed wildly. So what? You don't have a weapon, you can't stop me with sword intent alone. The giant sword in Yan Fei's hand already carried Tao Tao's yuan qi and slashed towards Feng Zhaoqi's head. In just an instant, he could split Feng Zhaoqi into 2. As for sword intent, it was just an imposing aura. It's like you're standing in front of a supreme expert. That expert doesn't attack you, but you can feel a strong stinging pain on your face, as if it was being blown away by a bone-chilling cold wind. However, although this kind of thing was rare and precious, it had to be accompanied by a weapon attack in order to display its power like a tiger adding wings to its wings. Die! Yan Fei's yuan qi erupted. Clang! Suddenly, the giant sword stopped, unable to descend any further. Everyone hurriedly looked over and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. After using his sword intent to cut off the sticky yuan qi on his body, Feng Zhaoqi regained his freedom and raised his right hand. He actually used an index finger to block the sharp sword. How is this possible? Feng Zhaoqi was furious and desperately suppressed the giant sword. However, when the sharp blade of the giant sword sliced into Feng Zhaoqi's finger, it actually produced a string of sparks. Who said that without weapons, you can't kill people? Feng Zhaoqi said indifferently. He tilted his left hand, forcefully separating the giant sword, and then his right index finger suddenly jumped up from the bottom. A sharp sword light instantly cut Yan Fei in half. The section of the corpse was incomparably smooth, and only after a full 2 seconds did his organs and blood spill out. Feng Zhaoqi swung his raised right hand downwards, and with a chi sound, a half-meter-long arc-shaped sword mark was sliced out from the arena. The spectators were amazed by this spectacular match. The Haoran sect was simply too powerful. Ah, ah, ah. Li Qingchuan shouted excitedly, "Idol! Feng Zhaoqi, you are my idol. You have actually cultivated your body into a sword. A true expert of the sword Dao could be a sword from head to toe. His hair was a sword, and his fingers were swords. Even his clothes could be used as swords. Amazing, too awesome." Xiang Nan couldn't help but applaud. As the referee announced Feng Zhaoqi's victory, he stepped off the arena and casually waved his hand. The sword that fell onto the arena suddenly vibrated. Then, it flew off the ground with a whoosh and landed directly in Feng Zhaoqi's embrace. Xiang Nan sincerely admired, "You should not only cherish this sword all day long, right? Instead, you should constantly comprehend the spirit of the sword, the will of the sword." This was similar to the small animals that were hiding outside the temple all day long and listening to monks chanting scriptures. After a long time, their bodies would also be stained with some Buddhist nature and spiritual energy. Feng Zhaoqi tilted his head slightly and looked at Xiang Nan. "You were the first to see it." Xiang Nan nodded. This silent Feng Zhaoqi was a ruthless character. "Let's go. The last battle is about to begin. Jiang Yu is going to fight." Everyone walked together and headed to the 5th stage. The opponent of the Qi sect, Jiang Yu, who was at the 3rd level of the Origin realm, was actually a disciple of the Quicksand sect. This Flozan sect disciple was slightly inferior to Yan Fei and was at the late 4th level of Origin return. He had already seen senior brother Yan Fei's match, so he was very afraid of the Haoran sect disciples and immediately released the Quicksand world. However, it was obvious that not only was his cultivation lagging behind Yan Fei, but his martial skill proficiency was also slightly inferior to Yan Fei's. Yan Fei's Quicksand world covered the entire arena, and although this contestant's Quicksand world was also dissatisfied with the arena, the density and thickness of his Yuan Qi were much weaker. After that Yuan Qi stuck to Jiang Yu could even do some walking movements. If it was Yan Fei, Jiang Yu probably wouldn't even be able to lift his leg. Luo Yuan said. "Yes." Feng Zhaoqi nodded and said, "The stickiness is much worse." Furthermore, Feng Zhaoqi pondered for a moment and said, "He met Jiang Yu. He was born to be a nemesis." "What do you mean?" Luo Yuan asked curiously. None of them had seen Jiang Yu attack with all his might. Could it be that Feng Zhaoqi had seen him before? Could it be that the Qi sect's martial arts were naturally used to restrain the Quicksand sect's martial arts? "Ha, you don't have a sharp blade like Feng Zhaoqi. I'll see how you deal with it." The Quicksand sect disciples cried out excitedly, "Today, I will behead a nature sect disciple and enjoy that unparalleled honor." As he spoke, the disciple held a sledgehammer in his hand and immediately ran towards Jiang Yu. Jiang Yu twisted her body and realized that her flexibility was greatly reduced. She simply stopped moving forward and raised a finger instead. Immediately after, a ring of light appeared on his finger. At first glance, it looked like a shining ring, but then the ring flew out, slowly expanding and resembling a shining bracelet. When the Quicksand sect disciple rushed forward, this halo suddenly expanded. He instantly possessed a diameter of 2 meters and quickly descended, trapping the Quicksand sect disciples inside. Following that, the halo shrank. This halo actually encircled the upper body of the Quicksand sect disciple, binding his arms and chest together. What is this? The quicksand sect disciple was greatly shocked. He was unable to move his arms, so he hurriedly used his yuan qi to stick to the sledgehammer and smashed it towards Jiang Yu. Jiang Yu waved her right index finger and another halo flew out. After the halo expanded this time, it circled the warhammer. Then, the halo suddenly fell down and smashed the warhammer to the ground. What was even more bizarre was that there was suddenly a gap under the halo. The gap was like a nail. The two sides of the gap were nailed into the surface of the arena and the warhammer was placed on the ground. Jiang Yu smiled and said, "Do you have any new methods? If not, I'm going to fight back." As she spoke, she waved her right index finger and another halo flew out and landed on the disciple of the quicksand sect. He already had a halo around him. After adding the second halo, it was as if he was covered with two circular muscles. His contractility suddenly increased a little. Jiang Yu waved his hand and a series of halos flew out. Every additional set of halos on the disciples of the quicksand sect would increase their contractility by 1 point. After his body was covered with 5 halos, the contractility of those 5 halos was about to strangle his body into his flesh. Ha! The quicksand sect disciple cried out in pain, but his chest was wrapped in a terrifying force, so he could not shout loudly. Jiang Yu's slender index finger gently shook, and a small halo revolved around her index finger nimbly. Jiang Yu smiled and said, "If this 6th halo is put on, your body will be strangled into 2 halves. Aren't you going to surrender?" The quicksand sect disciple's face turned purple from being strangled. He hurriedly said, "I admit defeat, I admit defeat." This Xiang Nan exchanged a glance with everyone and said in unison, "Isn't this move too scary?" The audience were all dumbfounded. Haran sect's Qi sect has been able to play with Yuan Qi to such a level of purity. Chapter 274 Xiang Long. After the top 100 advancement tournament was over, everyone returned to the Haran sect to celebrate. Everyone first congratulated Mo Hai and Li Qingchuan on their advancement. In the following days, they were fellow disciples. Mo Hai raised his glass and said, "Back then, Xiang Nan was able to enter the Haran sect, which made Qingchuan and I very envious. I didn't expect that we would also have this qualification now. In the future, I hope that fellow disciples can take care of each other." Li Qingchuan also stood up and raised his glass with Mo Hai, saying, "Here, Brother Hai and I propose a toast to everyone." Everyone stood up and drank together. Then Shen Lin Hai said, "Since you two are good friends of Xiang Nan, then we will be brothers from now on. Come." Cheers again. Everyone raised their glasses and drank together again, feeling that they were drinking very happily. But Muron Wanqing had been observing Xiang Nan from the side. She asked curiously, "Xiang Nan, look at your expression. Is something wrong?" Xiang Nan's mood was not high, and he kept lowering his head as if he was silently thinking about something. Hearing Muron Wanqing's words, everyone looked towards Xiang Nan. Xiang Nan thought for a while and finally made up his mind. He decided to trust his friends and said, "There's something I think it's time to tell you. It's like this." "What?" Everyone was shocked after hearing Xiang Nan's words. Luo Yuan said angrily, "The Heavenly Profound Sect." Xiang Nan, did the people from the Heavenly Profound Sect really sneak into our 12 sects for the joint examination? Xiang Nan's expression was solemn as he said, "At present, it should be like this. However, it is not clear who the 5 people are." "What courage!" Shen Lin Hai slapped the table, shaking his wine cup and vegetables to the point that even the dishes jumped. He said, "The people of the 9 firmaments continent actually dared to sneak into our blue tide continent's joint examination. They clearly do not place us in their eyes." Murong Wanqing and the others all had unhappy expressions on their faces. After Xiang Nan announced this matter, everyone's fighting spirit rose unprecedentedly. Had someone bullied him to the doorstep? This is great. If we don't give them some color to see, where is the face of the Haoran sect? Xiang Nan said in a heavy tone, "I brought this up to let everyone be mentally prepared in advance. The Profound Sky sect must have done a thorough investigation this time. I hope that everyone will not fight an unprepared battle." Murong Wanqing frowned and said, "According to what you said, the black-clothed man and the white-clothed man don't seem to understand each other. If that's the case, it's very likely that the 5 black-clothed men are all from the Profound Sky sect, while the white-clothed man is from the Flying Cloud sect. In other words, we only need to understand the characteristics of the Heavenly Profound sect's martial techniques." "That's what I think too." Xiang Nan nodded and said, "But the problem is, I've observed almost every single player in the top 100, but not a single one of them uses the Heavenly Profound sect's martial techniques. There are a total of 16 cultivation methods in the Profound Sky sect." Ah! After listening to Xiang Nan's introduction, everyone was dumbfounded. Mo Hai was shocked. "Isn't there only 5 powerful cultivation methods in the Grand Nature sect? There are actually 16 of them in the Profound Sky sect." "Yes, this is where the Profound Sky sect's strength lies." Xiang Nan nodded and said, "I will explain the characteristics of these 16 cultivation methods to everyone. In short, I hope that everyone can do it according to their strength. If you can't beat them, don't force them. They know us well now, but we don't know anything about them." This night, almost no one slept. All of them were boiling with passion as they rubbed their fists and wanted to compete with the experts of the Heavenly Profound sect. However, after thinking for a while, Xiang Nan felt that something was wrong. Could it be that the experts of the Profound Sky sect didn't use their sect's cultivation methods this time? Instead, he used the techniques of the Haoran sect to defeat the Haoran sect. On the second day, the arena competition continued according to the rules. Yesterday, it was the top 100 advancement tournament, but today, 100 contestants were competing for the top 50. At the same time, the number of competition areas was directly reduced to 2. They were only divided into the first and second competition areas. Each day, there were only 10 matches, 4 in the morning and 6 in the afternoon. After 50 matches in 5 days, the top 25 names will be selected. The order of their appearances was still determined by the number of lots drawn. Xiang Nan drew number 36, which was the 4th day of the top 50 advancement tournament. Murong Wanqing drew number 22, Shen Linhai drew number 9, Luo Yuan number 27, Feng Zhaoqi number 43, and Jiang Yu number 33. At this stage of the competition, in order to increase the interest of the 12 consecutive examinations, the 12 sects jointly launched a potential rankings. This list was voted by all the spectators to determine the top 50 players in advance. It was based on everyone's conjectures about the performances of all the contestants. When the list was announced, the audience was overwhelmingly praiseworthy, but there were also a small number of people who felt very unconvinced, because the list echoed the rankings most people had in mind, while some people did not think so. The first place on the potential rankings was undisputed. It was still occupied by Hong Bin of the Haoran sect. The second place was Jiang Cheng, the third place was Zhou Xianyong, and the fourth place was Chu Yan. The top 5 were almost taken care of by the Haoran sect. In the remaining top 10 rankings, there was one of the biggest dark horses, and that was Feng Zhaoqi. Feng Zhaoqi's sword Dao attainments against Yan Fei had already deeply convinced everyone, because Yan Fei had already reached the 14th place in everyone's hearts. The so-called Dark Horse was an unexpected expert. Almost all of the top 10 rankings were at the 5th level of origin return. Only Feng Zhaoqi was at the 3rd level of origin return. There were a total of 3 Dark Horses on this potential list. One was Feng Zhaoqi, who was ranked 10th, one was Xiang Nan, who was ranked 22nd, and the other was Yi Dong, who was ranked 25th. The battle between Xiang Nan and the strong man gave him a lot of impression. As soon as today's first match started, it immediately aroused everyone's unlimited enthusiasm. In the first battle, Zhou Xianyong, who was ranked 3rd on the potential rankings, fought against Xiang Long of the Blazing Fire sect. Wow, in the first battle, you can see Zhou Xianyong, who is ranked 3rd on the list. Everyone cheered. Zhou Xianyong wore a white robe and jumped onto the arena in a handsome and beautiful manner. Immediately after, everyone's gaze began to search for Xiang Long's figure. They saw a strong man sitting cross-legged in the crowd below the arena, his hands carelessly crossed on his knees. When he stood up, everyone was shocked. Good, so tall. That Blazing Fire sect disciple, Xiang Long, was actually an astonishing 3 meters tall. This height was not something that could be seen in the ordinary world, unless one was suffering from gigantism. However, in the world of martial artists, even though there were very few people 3 meters tall, there were still some. Chapter 275 Black Dragon. This guy is even stronger than that Meng Hao. Everyone was shocked. Previously, Meng Hao from the Blazing Fire sect had been considered to be of great stature, but now that he was compared to Xiang Long, he immediately felt that he was nothing compared to Xiang Long, who was also a 5th level origin returning realm expert. However, not only did he grow tall, his body was also astonishingly strong. His arms were as thick as the waist of an ordinary martial artist. Under such an astonishing height, he did not seem to be out of proportion. Instead, he possessed an extreme beauty of strength. Because his height was too exaggerated, it was difficult not to attract the attention of others. Many spectators immediately recognized Xiang Long, but everyone was not impressed by his previous match. It seemed that there was nothing too frightening about him. How pitiful. An outer sect audience shook their heads sympathetically. This Xiang Long met Zhou Xianyong in the first battle. I'm afraid he'll be beaten to death. Yeah, just because you're strong doesn't mean you're that strong. I'm afraid you're a paper tiger. That was what he said, but when Xiang Long stepped onto the arena with big strides and the wind of tigers and tigers, he really gave everyone a kind of visual shocking power. How could that be a human? It was simply a human-type demonic beast. Almost 90% of the attention on the scene was focused on arena number 1, and that arena number 2 had just begun, but it lacked attention. When Zhou Xianyong and Xiang Long stood opposite each other, the difference in height caused everyone to gasp. Zhou Xianyong was about 1.85 meters tall. This wasn't considered low, but compared to Xiang Long, who was more than 3 meters tall, he looked like a dwarf. Heh, what did you eat to grow up? Zhou Xianyong smiled indifferently. When he observed Xiang Long, he could only raise his head high. He really looked up. Xiang Long stood in front of Zhou Xianyong like a small mountain. He did not speak. As he breathed, his chest rose and fell steadily, giving people an unshakable feeling of weight. Arena number 1, the first round of the top 50 advancement tournament begins. The referee read out the signal for the start of the match. Blazing Fire Sect. Zhou Xianyong smiled and stretched out 5 fingers. I'll defeat you in 5 moves. As he spoke, Zhou Xianyong took out a large sword. The length of the sword was 2.3 meters, and the width of the sword reached 2 astonishing palms. At first glance, it looked like a large silver wooden board, but the sword blade was incomparably sharp, shining brightly in the sunlight. If I remember correctly, Zhou Xianyong seems to be from the saber sect. Xiang Nan said. Yes, you can also say that, because he was originally in the sword sect, and later transferred to the saber sect. Luo Yuan said. Changing factions meant that the cultivation method was inappropriate. Zhou Xianyong must have discovered that he was not suitable for Xiantian Dipper Qi, so he went to the saber sect to study primordial Dipper Qi. This situation was quite common and not unusual. At this moment, the battle had already begun. Xiang Long remained silent and walked towards Zhou Xianyong with large strides. The Yuan Qi on his body began to expand, and scales of Yuan Qi appeared on his body. Behind him, there was a Yuan Qi snake tail. This move is the same as Meng Hao's. Everyone whispered. But now, it seemed that Xiang Long's strength should be higher than Meng Hao's, and his strength surpassed Meng Hao's. Is that all the Blazing Fire sect has? Zhou Xianyong smiled arrogantly and rushed out. Clang! The large sword slashed into Xiang Long's arm, but it let out a metallic collision sound, causing a flame to splatter out. Then, Xiang Long waved his big arm and sent Zhou Xianyong flying. Hiss! The entire audience sucked in a breath of cold air. Isn't that Xiang Long's power too terrifying? Zhou Xianyong was an expert ranked 3rd on the potential rankings. His sword strike was actually sent flying by Xiang Long. However, Zhou Xianyong was not in a sorry state. After spinning twice in the air, he landed steadily. The corner of his mouth had already curled up slightly and said, "Interesting." Zhou Xianyong's body trembled as something slowly flowed in the air behind him. Gradually, that thing condensed into the phantom image of a black flood dragon. Wow! The audience cried out in alarm. Are you very confident in your strength? Zhou Xianyong held his sword in both hands and leapt high into the air, hacking towards Xiang Long. At the same time that the sword slashed down, the enormous black flood dragon phantom behind him actually rushed forward with a whoosh and bit the sword with its mouth. This scene was extremely shocking. At first glance, it looked like a flood dragon diving towards Xiang Long with a sharp blade in its mouth. So strong. Mo Hai's pupils contracted when he saw this. Xiang Nan and the others sat at the side and nodded silently. This Zhou Xianyong was very difficult to deal with. Looking at Xiang Long, his body also trembled, and a giant python phantom appeared that enveloped his entire body. Immediately after, he began to charge forward, moving a pair of long legs and rumbling towards Zhou Xianyong. His height was already frightening, and coupled with his current charge, he gave people an irresistible visual pressure. Boom! Zhou Xianyong's sword collided with Xiang Long's right arm. With just this moment, Zhou Xianyong's terrifying strength caused Xiang Long's legs to bend and he was about to kneel on the ground. Xiang Long's waist twisted abruptly, and the huge snake tail behind him swept towards Zhou Xianyong with the whistling of the wind. The black flood dragon phantom behind Zhou Xianyong also threw out its huge black tail, which collided with the snake tail and shattered the snake tail in an instant. Kneel down. Zhou Xianyong's spirits rose, and the Yuan Qi on his hands increased in power, suppressing it with a fierce force. Xiang Long couldn't take it anymore, so he could only jump backwards quickly. Sure enough, the strength is astonishing. You can even jump backwards under this kind of pressure. Everyone was stunned. Can you escape? Zhou Xianyong smiled coldly and jumped up again. This one was more than 10 meters tall. Black wind, slash. He raised his sword high and quickly slashed down towards Xianglong. The black flood dragon in the sky actually opened its bloody mouth and spat out a black fireball. What's that? Luo Yuan, Shenlin Hai, and the others were all shocked. The black fireball instantly engulfed Zhou Xianyong's sword from top to bottom. Then, the fireball was carried by the sword and turned into a streak of black flame sword light. Spiritual fire. Feng Zhaoqi frowned and turned to look at Muron Wanqing. Muron Wanqing shook her head slightly. No, it's just Yuan Qi flames. However, his martial skill is quite special, changing the color of Yuan Qi flames. Even so, the black flame sword light was extremely shocking. A large crescent moon sword radiance burned with a raging black flame as it slashed down towards Xianglong with lightning speed. The black flame sword light instantly engulfed Xianglong, and a small black cloud of mushrooms slowly rose up on the spot. Dead for sure. The audience was amazed and stood up to applaud. That Xianglong will undoubtedly die. Not to mention the disciples of the Blazing Fire sect, even the top 10 experts of the Haran sect would not be able to withstand this sword strike. This Zhou Xianyong is so strong that people are scared to death. Luo Yuan let out a long breath. It's not over yet. Xiang Nan's expression became serious. What? Everyone was stunned and hurriedly looked inside the mushroom cloud. However, he saw a black figure standing in the thick black smoke. Chapter 276 Humanoid Demonic Beast. In the sky, Zhou Xianyong had already revealed a triumphant smile. He was enjoying everyone's applause and cheers. Suddenly, the thunderous applause in the valley stopped. Ha! Zhou Xianyong looked at the smoke in disbelief and said in shock, "Is he still alive? Are you kidding? Who?" As he spoke, Zhou Xianyong condensed his Yuan Qi into his mouth and blew out. The thick smoke was gradually blown away. Inside, Xianglong's enormous figure slowly became clear. Countless people cried out in shock. This fellow was struck by such a terrifying sword light, yet he was not hacked down. Boom! 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 The sect attire on Xianglong's upper body had been completely destroyed, revealing only a shocking and strong body. As he walked out, he stepped on the arena 1 foot at a time and actually made footsteps that did not match his weight at all. What the hell? The corners of Zhou Xianyong's mouth twitched. He raised his sword high and sent another black wind slash. The black flood dragon spat out a black fireball. The moment it merged with the sword, it transformed into a black flame sword light. Boom! The black flame sword light was extremely fast. With a flash in the sky, it struck Xianglong's back. This time, it was even more powerful than the previous sword strike. It caused the entire arena to be pierced through by the force, leaving behind numerous fine cracks. The intensely burning black flames emitted billowing black smoke. The core region of the explosion was compressed into a black cloud that was narrow and wide, and another mushroom cloud rose. This time, he should be dead. Zhou Xianyong landed on the ground, both hands holding onto the hilt of the sword. Still alive. Xiang Nan's eyes turned cold, and a bad premonition suddenly appeared in his heart. What exactly was going on? It was impossible for Xianglong to stand up after 2 such powerful attacks. As a result, Xianglong's enormous body really came out from the thick smoke. This. Zhou Xianyong raised his head in shock. Is that all you have? Xianglong finally spoke. He had a strange smile on his face. It was like a cold smile, but it was different. It was more like the feeling of a predator at the top of the food chain when he saw delicious food. As he spoke, Xiang solemnly smashed a pair of huge fists together. Following that, all the muscles in his body began to wriggle. Ah! The spectators felt as if they were rolling in 5. Xiang Long's wriggling muscles were like large meat worms crawling about, looking extremely disgusting. Every time his muscles wriggled, his body became even bigger. At this moment, he had already soared to a height of 4 meters. Xiang Nan suddenly looked at Mo Hai. The 3-revolution steel body that Mo Hai used to use also had this effect of increasing his body size. However, Mo Hai was sweating profusely as he looked at it. I know what you're thinking, but he's different from my rank 3 steel body. The 3rd revolution steel body used a martial skill to temporarily activate its body, but that Xiang Long was more like restore. Xiang Nan and Muron Wanqing said in unison. This was the difference. Mo Hai was originally around 2 meters tall. After using the special martial skill, his body grew, but this was temporary. As for Xiang Long, it was more like he was already 4 meters tall. Normally, he had suppressed his height to 3 meters, but now, he had only returned to his normal size. But, could such a thing as suppressing one's height really be accomplished? Look! That Xiang Long's body is still growing. Everyone felt their scalps go numb, unable to understand what was happening in front of them. You're courting death. Zhou Xianyong was enraged. He quickly ran around Xiang Long and slashed at his enormous body with his giant sword. When each sword light sliced into Xiang Long's body, the sword light rubbed against his skin and created a series of sparks. However, not a single sword was able to break through Xiang Long's defense. Even after Xiang Long was struck, his body didn't even tilt slightly. It was still soaring. Xiang Long's body had already broken through 4.5 meters and was still crazily climbing. This kind of physique had already completely surpassed the scope of humans. An even more terrifying scene had just appeared. As Xiang Long's body continued to grow higher and higher, a pair of black horns actually grew on top of his head. His yuan qi has changed. Muron Wanqing suddenly stood up. The expanding yuan qi in Xiang Long's body suddenly boiled, and then the color changed to a pale gray color. Roar! Xiang Long raised his right hand and clenched his incomparably large fist, causing a muffled roar that didn't seem like a human voice to come from his throat. Cow! What the hell is that thing? Luo Yuan and the others were all dumbfounded. Xiang Nan's heart skipped a beat, his tone extremely solemn. Demonic qi. How is that possible? Is he a transformed demonic beast? No, demonic beasts don't have this kind of state. It's either in the form of demonic beasts or humans, but Xiang Long seems to have more humans and less demonic beasts. Could it be? Everyone looked at Xiang Nan collectively. The thing that I'm most worried about is still happening. Xiang Nan sighed and said, that's right, this change is almost the same as the monster I mentioned to you in the Qingshui forest. The difference is that that monster is mainly in the form of a demonic beast, while this Xiang Long is mainly in the form of a human. Damn it, Xiang Nan clenched his fists. He originally thought that the monster in Qingshui forest was just an individual phenomenon created by a whirlwind alchemist. But now, it seemed that the situation was far from that simple. It must be him. Xiang Nan gritted his teeth and said, one of the 5 black-clothed men is Xiang Long. But, when did the profound sky sect master this method of body refinement? To turn a human into a half-human and half-demon. However, This Xiang Long's form was clearly more perfect than that of the monster in the Qing Shui forest. This was because not only was Xiang Long dominated by humans, even his Yuan Qi was mixed with demonic energy, not demonic energy. In essence, Xiang Long was still a human, so the referees could not disqualify him. "You monster, go to hell. Primordial Dipper Qi." Zhou Xianyong was furious. He charged towards Xiang Long head-on. Halfway through, he suddenly jumped, and a violent primordial astral qi burst out. The thick primordial Dipper Qi, mixed with incomparable power, was condensed onto the sword. The sword slashed down, and the black flood dragon in the sky let out a roar. The entire body of the black flood dragon swooped down. Boom! The sword strike was unbiased and struck right above Xiang Long's head. It hacked into the middle of the pair of strange black horns. With such an astonishing sword strike, Xiang Long was finally shaken. However, his enormous body had only been sliced back half a meter. He actually didn't dodge, directly using his head to withstand a sword strike. Dreaming, I must be dreaming. Zhou Xianyong's eyes were filled with confusion. He used all of his strength to directly hit Xiang Long's head, but was this the only result? Xiang Long unconcernedly stretched his muscles and bones. As he twisted his neck, a crackling sound of bones could be heard. "This time, it's my turn." As Xiang Long spoke, his voice was buzzing and frightening. Chapter 277 Supreme Power. Zhou Xianyong hurriedly jumped out and maintained a distance of 20 meters from Xiang Long. As for Xiang Long, he took large strides and rumbled towards Zhou Xianyong. "Damn monster!" Zhou Xianyong raised his sword high, "Black cloud cover the moon." As he spoke, Zhou Xianyong held the sword in both hands and his body began to spin rapidly. The large sword was also brandished into a circle of light. Immediately after, the black flood dragon phantom opened its mouth and spat out an unprecedentedly strong black fireball. The diameter of the fireball had already reached an astonishing 5 meters. When the fireball collided and exploded on the sword, Zhou Xianyong shouted as he rose from the ground. The giant sword in his hand was wrapped in black flames and instantly condensed into a 10-meter-long, gigantic sword light. Xianyong has already been forced to use his strongest trump card. Hong Bin and Chu Yan exchanged glances. That Chu Yan was shocked. Is this Xiang Long a human or a demon? However, it's no longer important now. Xianyong should be able to kill Xiang Long. In the sky, Zhou Xianyong held a 10-meter-tall sword light. The surface of the sword light burned with black flames, and even the air was twisted by the flames. Yes. Zhou Xianyong slashed the sword that shook the mountains and rivers. The 10-meter black flame sword light fiercely slashed down, causing the entire audience to gasp. However, Xiang Long crossed his arms and raised his body high up. He actually wanted to use his body to block this sword strike. Boom! The black flame sword light struck Xiang Long. Its terrifying hacking power nailed Xiang Long into the arena. Only his head was exposed on the surface of the arena, and the rest of his body parts were embedded in the arena. However, following Peng's explosion, Xiang Long jumped out of the arena with a large amount of rubble. As for his arms, they were completely unharmed. I don't believe it. Zhou Xianyong swept his sword across with a huge sword light. Xiang Long continued to advance towards Zhou Xianyong and raised his left arm. The sword light that swept over was accurately hacking into Xiang Long's arm, but this time, Xiang Long used his Yuan Qi to strengthen the arena and fix his body in place. Boom! When the sword slashed down, the arena was struck by a terrifying force and moved to the right. It actually slid for nearly 100 meters. With a loud boom, he crashed into arena number 2. This scene was simply too unimaginable. The entire valley was completely silent. The arena had been sliced away, but Xianglong was still standing at a distance, not moving an inch. What kind of defense is this? Luo Yuan and Shen Linhai exchanged a glance. Both of their faces were pale and they already felt fear from the bottom of their hearts. Fortunately, the battle on Arena 2 had just ended. Otherwise, this collision would definitely affect others. Who? Zhou Xianyong grabbed the sword with both hands. The huge sword light on the sword hadn't dissipated yet, but he was already gasping for breath. I've had enough. Xianglong twisted his neck and suddenly exploded beneath his feet. His enormous body instantly rushed towards Zhou Xianyong. So fast. The audience stood up at the same time. You. Zhou Xianyong was shocked and hurriedly waved his sword light, trying to force Xianglong back. However, Xianglong was too fast, and his palm directly hit Zhou Xianyong's stomach. Peng's muffled explosion caused Zhou Xianyong's stomach to explode. Shattered organs and bones, mixed with dark red blood, sprayed out in a radial direction. Those pieces of meat and bones actually flew onto the light screen in the competition area, and even stuck to the light screen, slowly sliding down. Zhou Xianyong's body collapsed. Not only had his stomach been blown apart, the powerful force of Xianglong's palm had even caused the part of Zhou Xianyong's body that did not come into direct contact with the palm force to explode at the same time. His legs and shoulders were blasted into 2 strands of flesh and blood, spraying onto the arena, while his head was subjected to an incomparable pressure. His eyeballs exploded, and his skull exploded into pieces of bones. Zhou Xianyong's entire body was gone. It turned into a sputtering bloodstain on the arena. Above the light screen in the distance, a broken piece of meat slowly slid down. After losing its moisture, it fell down. The piece of meat was first glued to strands of blood, and then the strands of blood broke apart. The piece of meat fell to the ground with a loud cracking sound. Vomit. The spectators in the spectator stands began to vomit. Xianyong, Hong Bin, Chu Yan, Yang Liener, and the others' expressions changed drastically. Bastard, you killed our Zhou family. In Haotian City, the Zhou clan's influential people all stood up and roared angrily. I don't care who you are. Our Zhou clan will definitely make you pay with blood. Facing the furious curses of the Zhou family, Xianglong twisted his wrist a few times and made a crackling sound. He hooked his fingers in the direction of the Zhou family and said, "Come on, I'll let you all go together." Ha 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 ha. Haran sect is just a bunch of trash. What are you talking about? All of the Haran sect disciples stood up at the same time, pointing at Xianglong and cursing loudly. Xianglong's enormous body slowly walked on the arena and said, "Trash, all of them are useless trash that can't withstand a single blow. Your Blue Tide continent is a garbage station that produces trash. What are you talking about?" The audience was infuriated by Xianglong's words. Xianglong jumped off the arena, grabbed the edge of the arena with his big hand, and pulled forward with a rumble. The shouts and curses at the scene froze in shock. The weight of the 200-meter diameter arena could be said to be terrifying. Zhou Xianyong used all of his strength to attack, and only then did he move the arena horizontally. However, Xianglong unexpectedly easily grabbed onto such a large arena and dragged it on the ground. After he dragged the arena 50 meters away, he casually swung it and the huge arena soared into the air. Wei Man passed through the sky and landed on the same spot as arena number 1 with a loud boom. This caused the ground to shake, and the loud vibration of the arena landing in the valley could not dissipate for a long time. Strength. Unparalleled power. Then, how can the arena be dragged? The audience went from anger to fear. Everyone took a closer look and saw that the edge of the arena that Xian Long had just grabbed had actually been dug out with 5 finger holes. Xian Long jumped onto the arena. He hugged his shoulders and proudly said, "I'm Xian Long. I'm from the 9 Firmaments continent, the Profound Sky sect. I came to Blue Tide continent this time to abuse you scum, ha 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 ha." The Profound Sky sect. Everyone was shocked. At this moment, as long as one's brain wasn't broken, they would realize how bad the situation was. The people from the Heavenly Profound sect have come to the territory of the Haran sect to smash the ground. If Xian Long really won the championship, wouldn't it be equivalent to a disciple of the Heavenly Profound sect overthrowing the experts of the entire Blue Tide continent? Quickly disqualify him. A spectator pointed at Xian Long and shouted in fear, "He is not from our Blue Tide continent. Quickly disqualify him." However, the direction of the Haran sect did not give any indication. In arena number 1, the referee announced, the winner of arena number 1, Blazing Fire sect Xian Long. Regardless of whether Xian Long was a member of the Profound Sky sect or not, he did officially enter the Blazing Fire sect and entered the 12 sect joint examination as a disciple of the Blazing Fire sect. You can't disqualify him just because he once belonged to the Profound Sky sect. Chapter 278 Peng. After hearing the referee's announcement, Xian Long laughed arrogantly, "Dregs of the Blue Tide continent, face your terrifying fate. Next, everyone who fights with me will die." As soon as these words were spoken, the faces of a large number of contestants participating in the arena competition turned pale. "Are you kidding me? I don't want to fight that kind of monster." Even Zhou Xianyong, who is ranked 3rd on the potential rankings, is powerless against Xian Long. How can we win this monster? The battle between Zhou Xianyong and Xian Long caused everyone in the 12 sects to panic. On the first day of the top 50 advancement tournament, there were 4 battles in the morning and 6 battles in the afternoon. However, in the next 2 battles in the morning, no one was interested in watching. Compared to the first battle, the later battles were like children living in a family. What everyone didn't know was that there were 4 disciples of the Heavenly Profound sect like Xian Long. What should we do? What should we do now? Luo Yuan's face was pale and he said, "I thought that the disciples of the Profound Sky sect were at most about the same as us. I didn't expect them to be so powerful. It's impossible for us to win." Xiang Nan. Murong Wanqing stared at Xiang Nan. After investigating the black-clothed man incident, did you gain an in-depth understanding of the Profound Sky sect? Otherwise, you wouldn't know that they have 16 sect techniques. What kind of thing is Xian Long using? Xiang Nan's expression was heavy as he said, what he used was not the Heavenly Profound sect's martial technique. Perhaps it's a cultivation technique from the Flying Cloud sect. Or perhaps it's from another first-class sect. Shen Linhai asked. Not really. Xiang Nan shook his head. Xiang Nan also felt that there were many doubts. At present, he could not find any clues. Where did these people come from? In the past, the Heavenly Profound sect did not have such a martial skill. Could it be that in recent years, the Profound Sky sect has found a new martial technique? Or did he find a new method to refine his body? It could perfectly fuse a person's body with a demonic beast's. The bodies of humans and demonic beasts were different. It was impossible for them to fuse together, let alone possess the strength of demonic beasts and the explosive power of demonic energy. At the same time, it also possessed the attributes of human martial artist Yuan Qi. Xiang Nan couldn't even think of how he could do that. And the other four? Do you have the same ability as Xiang Long? After the match in the morning, the entire valley was in a mess. Everyone was talking about the issues related to the descending dragon. At this moment, the audience's enthusiasm for the 12 joint examinations had already transformed into a sense of crisis that came from their dignity. It doesn't matter who gets first. In short, we can't let Xiang Long win the championship. That's right. We have more than 100,000 people here, but we can't stop a single Xiang Long. There must be someone who can. Damn it, who can defeat Xiang Long? Hurry up and stand up. The Blazing Fire sect was forced by the enormous pressure of public opinion to unilaterally cancel Xiang Long's status as a disciple of the sect, but this matter was suppressed by the Haran sect. If he did this now, it would be equivalent to surrendering. This would be a devastating blow to the hearts of the Blue Tide Continent's martial artists. In the afternoon, the arena competition continued. However, the audience had lost their enthusiasm, and all of them were filled with unease. The entire 12 sects joint examination was shrouded in a layer of dark clouds that could not be seen. In the afternoon, the second arena, the third battle. One of the contestants in the competition was a martial artist from the second stage academy of the Haran sect, Lu Wei, a 5th level origin returning expert. The other was a martial artist from the Yellow Heavens sect, Su Bufan, at the 5th level of the origin realm. When Xiang Nan saw Su Bufan, his heart sank. Ah! Then Su Bufan came up in black. Why isn't he wearing the uniform of a disciple of the Yellow Heavens sect? That's right, Su Bufan was dressed in black, exactly the same as the 5 black-clothed men Xiang Nan saw. The only difference was that the loose hood had been lifted. This Su Bufan looked like an ordinary sunny youth with delicate features and a gentle smile. He didn't seem to have any special physical characteristics. It's him. This should be the second heavenly profound sect disciple, Xiang Nan said in a deep voice. Xiang Nan had just finished speaking when Su Bufan's next words caused a sensation in the audience. Su Bufan smiled brightly at Lu Wei and cupped his fists. I'm Su Bufan from the Lower Heaven Profound Sect. The Profound Sky Sect. Lu Wei was so frightened that he took 2 steps back and looked at Su Bufan with a look of fear. Bastard, don't be timid. You are a disciple of our Blue Tide Continent's Haran sect. You can't lose face in front of the Profound Sky sect. Some of the spectators began to curse. If even the Haran sect is afraid, how can our Blue Tide Continent's martial practitioners stand on their feet? Only you can deal with him. Fight him. He doesn't look as scary as Xiang Long. Maybe he can defeat him. The audience shouted in all directions. Hearing the shouts of the audience, Lu Wei's confidence suddenly doubled. He held his sword and looked at Su Bufan seriously. He thought to himself, this person looked ordinary, perhaps not as terrifying as Xiang Long. That's right, how could the Profound Sky sect be as powerful as Xiang Long? Not everyone in our Haran sect has the strength of Hongbin. Let the competition begin. At this moment, the referee announced. When Lu Wei heard the signal to start, he immediately rushed towards Su Bufan. We can't give him a chance to transform. Su Bufan must not be turned into a monster. Lu Wei gritted his teeth and used Xiantian astral qi in a sprint. The sword in his hand immediately started to tremble with an imposing aura. That's right, we have to do this. Defeat him. Kick Su Bufan out of the 12 joint examinations. As everyone cheered, Lu Wei felt even more motivated. His body had turned into a blurry shadow due to his fast speed as he ran wildly. However, Su Bufan was still smiling. He smiled and took a step sideways. When Lu Wei brushed past him, he lightly patted Lu Wei's shoulder with his palm. "I got it." Su Bufan smiled and said this. Then, he began to walk in the opposite direction of Lu Wei until he reached the edge of the arena. What is he doing? Is he admitting defeat? Under the gaping gazes of everyone, Lu Wei also turned around and looked at Su Bufan. "How did you?" Su Bufan had already walked to the edge of the arena. He raised his right hand and snapped his fingers, saying, "Peng." Just as he finished speaking, Lu Wei's expression suddenly changed drastically. Immediately after, his right shoulder began to swell, and with a loud boom, his entire body exploded into minced meat. Su Bufan smiled and jumped off the arena. Chapter 279 Haojing Arrival Army. Ah! Ah! Not a single person in the audience was able to utter a complete sentence. All of them opened their mouths wide. All the elders of the 12 sects, including the Haran sect elders, had expressions of astonishment and confusion on their faces. What kind of martial skill is this? Damn it, can this be considered a martial skill? The scene exploded, and countless spectators cried out in alarm, as if the valley had been dead a moment ago, but now it had suddenly come to life. What the hell? Then what did Su Bufan do? Why did Lu Wei suddenly explode? Li Qingchuan's mouth began to tremble. Xiang Nan narrowed his eyes and gritted his teeth. These damn bastards! Kill them without even frowning. They seem to enjoy the process of killing people. Murong Wanqing took a deep breath and said, when the enemy's life quickly faded away in their hands, Su Bufan's face, like Xiang Long's, was full of twisted excitement. What exactly is going on? Which one of you understands? Luo Yuan hurriedly asked. Xiang Nan narrowed his eyes and said, although I don't know what kind of martial skill Su Bufan used, I can roughly tell that Lu Wei's explosion was related to the moment Su Bufan patted his shoulder. It should be Su Bufan who injected a strand of Yuan Qi into Lu Wei's body. Even so, it doesn't make sense. Luo Yuan frowned and said, when an external Yuan Qi enters a martial artist's body, it will definitely be repelled by all Yuan Qi in the martial artist's body. It is impossible for it to explode. Furthermore, it is impossible for it to cause such frightening consequences. Unless Su Bufan could crush all of Lu Wei's Yuan Qi and even the entire spiritual sea with just the strength of one Yuan Qi. But the two of them are both at the 5th level of origin return. Even if the difference is large, it wouldn't be so outrageous, right? It's my turn to go on stage. All of you, pay attention and observe. Shen Lin Hai drew the 9th, and it was the 9th battle this afternoon. Lin Hai, be careful. Everyone was worried about Shen Lin Hai. Shen Lin Hai forced a smile and said, even if it's too late to say anything, I can't admit defeat on the spot. As he spoke, Shen Lin Hai entered the first ring area. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief when the opponent who walked onto the stage was an ordinary outer sect disciple, but they still didn't dare to let down their guard in their hearts. Perhaps that outer sect disciple was also a member of the Profound Sky sect. Not everyone would come up in black like Su Bufan. However, the results of the battle proved that everyone was thinking too much. That outer sect disciple was indeed very ordinary. Although he had the 5th level of origin return, he was still easily defeated by Shen Lin Hai, who was at the late stage of the 3rd stage of origin return. After seeing Shen Lin Hai's formidable strength, the originally depressed spectators regained some of their vitality. That day, after all the matches were over, everyone returned to the Hauran sect. And very quickly, the Hauran sect received news from Haojing. The news that the disciples of the Heavenly Profound sect had come to participate in the 12-sect joint examination had already spread to Haojing, and an iron decree had been placed on it. No matter what method he used, he couldn't let the disciples of the Heavenly Profound sect win. The order given by Haojing was to immediately impart the strongest martial skill of the Hauran sect to the disciples of the Hauran sect. But cramming at the last minute was not decisive, and it was already too late to do so. The next day, the arena competition was held as usual. When everyone arrived at the valley area, and the first match was about to begin, a sky-shading flying cavalry suddenly flew into the sky. Countless spectators raised their heads and looked up. Seeing the shocking scene in the sky, their hearts were beating wildly. Something big happened. Something big is going to happen this time. Isn't that Haotian's trump card army? Someone recognized him and pointed at the flying cavalry in the sky. Fire Cloud Flying Dragon. Everyone exclaimed in unison. In the sky, there were red dragons that were hundreds of meters long. This kind of dragon was a demonic beast, not a real dragon, but a type of flood dragon. As the fire cloud flying dragons soared in the sky, their enormous wings slowly flapped, immediately dyeing the entire sky filled with flames. As for the fire cloud flying dragon, it had a ferocious expression. With a snap of its nose, it would spit out 2 streaks of flames at any moment. This was the trump card army of the Haotian Empire that swept across the entire Blue Tide continent, the Fire Dragon Legion. Today, everyone was lucky to see the true body of the Fire Cloud Legion, and their blood boiled with excitement. Especially when the Fire Dragon Legion came out, there were hundreds of them. Standing on the backs of the overwhelming fire cloud flying dragons were neat and tidy cavalry, the black-armored Profound Tiger army. The black-armored Profound Tiger was one of the high-grade demonic beasts. Its level was slightly lower than the fire cloud flying dragon. Its entire body was naturally covered in striped black armor. Its defense was astonishing, and its impact power could even be said to be able to break through the steel city gates. Today, the Ace Legion, Fire Dragon Legion, and Black-Armored Profound Tiger Legion of the Haotian Empire arrived together. The tens of thousands of spectators opened their mouths wide, their hearts filled with fear and excitement. They're all here. They must be here to eliminate the disciples of the Heavenly Profound sect. Are you out of your mind? How is this possible? You still need to touch the military to kill a disciple of the Heavenly Profound sect. Any elder of the Hauran sect can handle it. At this moment, a loud and clear horn suddenly came to mind in the sky. A general in armor stood out of thin air and shouted loudly, "The Haotian Empire, the Fire Dragon Legion, and the Black-Armored Profound Tiger Legion want to borrow the Hauran mountain range for joint military exercises. Everyone, quickly retreat. The 12 joint examinations will be delayed by a month." Hearing these words, the entire audience erupted into an uproar. Even with his toes, he could understand that this was Haojing trying to buy time for the Hauran sect disciples. Elder Shi Beihong stepped into the air and stood with the general, as if he was negotiating something. Below, Xiang Long raised his head and laughed wildly. Is this the famous the Haotian Empire? Is this the grand first-class sect, the Hauran sect? It really makes people laugh out loud, because they are afraid that our Heavenly Profound sect disciples will win, yet they actually took out such despicable methods. Ha ha ha. The negotiation process between Elder Shi Beihong and the military did not seem to be going smoothly. In the style of the Hauran sect, it was impossible to use such a method to delay the match. However, the military was considering the overall situation, and the two sides held their own opinions and were stuck in a stalemate. Isn't this a bit too exaggerated? Isn't it just 5 heavenly profound sect disciples? Do you need to invite all the trump cards? An audience whispered. What you think is too simple. Let me ask you, what is the most precious resource in a continent? It is a martial artist resource. Because not every commoner has the talent to become a martial artist. Let's put it this way. The heavenly profound sect's challenge this time seems to be very simple, but in fact, it is not a small matter. Why? The man asked. The nearby person said, the confidence of martial artists is built by powerful officials and powerful sections. If the Haoran sect is defeated, then there is no need for much. We only need to lose 1/5 of our martial artists in the blue tide continent. What do you think will happen if we go to the 9 firmaments continent? In less than 50 years, the Haotian Empire's military strength will rapidly weaken. At that time, our military strength will drop by an entire grade. Furthermore, I suspect that this is only the first move of the Profound Sky sect. Chapter 280 Immense and Enduring. It was human nature to walk up high, just like martial artists in small places who desperately wanted to enter the East China Sea coast, or even the Haoran sect. Currently, the reason why Zhonglan continent was still able to occupy an important place was because they had retained a large number of martial artist resources, allowing martial artists to be willing to stay in the Haotian Empire. This was what people wanted. If the martial artists were determined to go to the 9 firmaments continent to develop, then the changes in their hearts would be unstoppable. At that time, there would be no martial artists left, so who would join the army? 20 out of 100 martial artists would deal a huge blow to the official military. The audience continued to ask, if this can disintegrate the power of a country, isn't that simple? As long as the Profound Sky sect sends some outstanding disciples to the various continents and defeats the experts of those continents, isn't that enough? Nonsense. The person next to him scolded, otherwise, why do you think that the martial practitioners of each continent are restricted to the martial practitioners within this continent? I'm afraid that the 12 joint examinations of the Haoran sect are too big. The heavenly profound sect has gotten into a loophole. Otherwise, this situation would not have happened. So it's still the Haoran sect's own problem. Everyone suddenly came to a realization. If this matter hadn't been handled properly, the Nature sect would have committed a huge crime. It was not unknown to the Haojing side that using military drills to delay the 12 joint examinations was a very embarrassing thing. However, Haojing did not have a choice. Considering the overall situation, even though he knew that he was embarrassed, he still had to do it. In the sky, Elder Shi Beihong and the military commander were arguing fiercely, but their voices had been cut off, and outsiders could not hear the specifics. This won't do. Elder Shi Beihong said, if we use such methods to delay the match, even if we win, we will still lose face. The commander said in a deep voice, Elder, now is not the time to consider the dignity of the sect, but the future of the Haotian Empire. If even the Haoran sect is defeated, then how can our Blue Tide continent's martial practitioners stay behind? Elder Shi Beihong said, even so, it is impossible to change the current situation by delaying for a month. All the martial artists who participated in the competition had already cultivated in seclusion before the competition. Their strength is in a saturated state, and a month is simply not enough for them to upgrade by another level. 1 month is not enough, but 2 months. The commander said resolutely. Elder Shi Beihong's heart suddenly sank. He seemed to have realized something, so he fiercely asked, what if 2 months isn't enough? A cold expression flashed across the commander's face as he said, at that time, my trump card legion will bloodbath the Haran mountain range. Not a single spectator, including the disciples of the profound sky sect, will be left behind to watch this match. Elder Shur Beihong only felt a bone-piercing cold wind blow through his heart. He gritted his teeth and said, "You actually dare to harbor such thoughts and place our Haran sect in such a place." Elder Shur Beihong was furious. He, who had always been gentle, had never shown such an expression before. The commander said coldly, "There's no harm in pushing the blame onto the heavenly devil religion at that time. No one will know the inside story." Elder Shur Beihong finally exploded and shouted, "Am I discussing responsibility with you? In your eyes, these innocent martial artists are only tools that can be sacrificed at will." No one knew what they were talking about, but Xiang Nan heard. It was because when he was chasing after the black-clothed man, Xiang Nan handed over an eagle eye to Elder Shur Beihong as evidence. At this moment, the eagle eye was in Elder Shur Beihong's sleeve. After hearing the commander-in-chief's words, Xiang Nan could only feel the thunder rumble. No wonder he had to use the trump card army. It turned out that they weren't here for a military drill, but were prepared to wash Haran Mountain with blood. Ha! Ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Just as the two sides were at a standstill, Elder Shur Beihong and the commander-in-chief froze in the sky at the same time. They felt an external force suddenly enveloping the entire Haran mountain range. Countless martial artists felt this kind of power, and countless pairs of eyes looked up into the sky at the same time. In the sky, a large number of floating clouds began to move, and at a speed visible to the naked eye, they condensed into a face that covered the sky and covered the sun. The face was shaped by white clouds, and its facial features were blurry, but it had a kind of intimidating dignity. "It's an old man," someone cried out in shock. Upon seeing this face, all the Haran sect elders bowed in unison. "Greetings, sect master." Heavens, the audience's brains buzzed as they shouted, "Sect Master Haran, Old Man Tian Dao." Dozens of outer sect disciples, including all the outer sect elders, also stood up in unison with respectful expressions on their faces. It was this old man. He used his own strength to guard the world of martial arts in the Blue Tide continent, allowing countless martial artists who looked up to him to stay behind willingly because they knew that there was Zhang Haran in the Blue Tide continent. Ah! The commander-in-chief was also shocked. He hurriedly clasped his fists and said, "So it's Senior Heavenly Tao. So, this is our sect master." Xiang Nan and the others raised their heads together, their eyes filled with shock. Not to mention the outer sect, even the people of the Haran sect might not be able to see the true appearance of the Heavenly Tao old man for the rest of their lives. "Huh, it's very lively today." Old man Tian Dao smiled faintly. His voice was very gentle, but it reached everyone's ears. "I already know the situation. From what I've seen, it's better to continue with the 12 joint examinations." The commander was so anxious that his forehead was covered in sweat. He dared to shout at Elder Shur Beihong, but he didn't dare to speak out in front of the Heavenly Tao old man no matter what. He could only bitterly say, "Senior Heavenly Tao, this. I'm afraid this." Old man Tian smiled slightly, "Don't worry, I'll explain myself to the emperor." "But, people," the commander said with difficulty. The Heavenly Tao old man shook his head and said, "People's hearts are not preserved like this. Our Blue Tide continent has experienced countless hardships and dangers throughout the ages. The reason why we managed to survive is not only because of brutal force. If our Haran sect loses, it is also the destiny of the heavens. It cannot be violated. If that's the case, I'm willing to personally apologize to the great emperor and imprison myself for 100 years to atone for my sins. But I believe that our Haran sect will not fail so easily." Hearing this, countless Haran sect disciples burst into tears. The heavenly Tao old man unconditionally chose to trust his own disciples, and he was even more willing to pay the price of 100 years in prison. The commander-in-chief was truly speechless this time, but in his heart, he admired the heavenly Tao old man to the extreme. If a sect master was unable to believe even his own disciples, and even his own heart could not be stabilized, how could he be called a sect master? He used his vast courage to forge the firm hearts of the disciples of the Nature's Nature sect. Haran sect. Someone shouted. Immediately after, all the people cried out in unison. More than 50 outer sect disciples and countless spectators cheered loudly. Haran sect. Haran sect. Haran sect. In the sky, the face of the white clouds gradually dissipated, followed by a distant and ancient voice that resounded throughout the heavens and the earth. Heavens bless the azure water, and it is immense. Novel Empire. Immortal God of Battle.